Welcome to the third and final day of our symposium. We appreciate everybody spending time with us. I know everybody's busy. We did have almost 500 people register for this event, so it was by far a record for our symposiums. It is also our first virtual, so I'm sure those things are correlated, but we appreciate it anytime you have. And people are attending from all over the world, and we will be providing videos of these sessions. So feel free to look for those in the next few days. I'll have just a couple quick comments, and then I'll hand it over to Nikki, our moderator for the day. But I always like to reinforce the reason we have these symposiums. We're fortunate to work with a number of companies around the world in this industry, and we see a lot of the best practices and innovations that are occurring. And we like to bring together kind of the community of companies we work with and invite speakers that we feel really have some great insights and innovations to share. So those are the people we've invited to speak. We've had really 2 days of great sessions thus far. But a common theme this year is the subscriber lifecycle management process. We've historically have really focused on reader revenue, which is what MATHER economics is primarily known for. But what we're finding is that in the digital area, there's a lot more to it than revenue. It's content analytics, it's engagement, and just the general kind of relationship with your clients or your readers. So over the past 2 days, we've had some phenomenal speakers. You can see the folks here, really a collection of entrepreneurial and innovative leaders that have shared how they're reinventing their companies to focus on subscriber revenue and really looking at their products. And in fact, there are some key themes that I just thought we'd recap. Almost every speaker thus far has emphasized the importance of really getting to know your customers. First-party data is a critical piece of that. There's an amazingly small percentage of digital audiences that are known to publishers. One of our speakers, Pete Doucette from the Philadelphia Inquirer, mentioned that they really only know about 1% of their digital audience, and their goal is to get that to 15% in a year. And other speakers have emphasized the importance of first-party data for a number of different applications, whether it's measuring content performance and engagement by your core readers, or retention, re-engagement and retention campaigns, and then lastly, even for advertising, given the big changes in that market. The other is content. That, one of the enormous benefits of moving to digital distribution platforms is that you can really see what types of content your readers are engaging with. And lastly, the engagement kind of is it's key to the long-term success of a subscription business, and it's not a once and done type of a thing. It's an ongoing process. People have used the terms like mindset and key, North Star metric. So really great sessions thus far. I'm looking forward to today's speakers. We really have another great lineup today. To take us through that lineup, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the third day, Nikki. We first worked with Nikki when she was the Chief Digital Officer and SVP at the Dallas Morning News. And I should mention that she was actually a speaker at our first symposium in Atlanta, back when we were in person. And so she is back now as our moderator, and we've been privileged to work with her throughout that time frame, both while she was at the Dallas Morning News and then the CEO at LifeBlue, and now the president of Insight, which is a technology agency also in Dallas that creates tremendous designs and user experiences and do them in a way that is sustainably coded. So with that, I will turn it over to Nikki. Thanks again for coming today. Take care. Thanks, Nikki.
All right, thank you, Matt. Great to be here, and good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. I want to keep us moving, and in case this is the first time that you're joining us for the symposium, just want to cover a little bit of housekeeping for you. As Matt mentioned, all the sessions will actually be recorded. So at the conclusion of the symposium, we will send you some links so you can access those directly. Make sure that if you want to ask questions throughout the symposium of any of our speakers, that you use the chat feature, which is down at the bottom of your Zoom window here. That way we'll be moderating those, taking a look at them, and I'll do my best to make sure that you get your questions answered. If you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to us. You can do that in the chat feature, or you can actually email Shelly, who's going to be looking for those as well, at shelly@mathereconomics.com. As I mentioned, you will get emailed a link to the sessions so that you can watch those recordings, but we also have some speakers who are willing to share their presentations. So we'll make sure we get those out to you as well for those who've granted us permission. There's some confidential information in here and such, so you might get a cleansed version. Also, we encourage you to watch the recording of different segments on Mather's YouTube channel, and we'd love for you to be engaged with us on both LinkedIn, Twitter, and if you're following today and want to just comment on anything you find interesting, you can use the hashtag Mather Symposium. So I just want to give you an idea of what you get to see today. This is a highlight of our speakers and just a little bit about the agenda. So we're going to kick off with a keynote address, and I'll walk through the introduction of Ben Monty here in just a moment. And then you'll get to hear from Selma Stern of Insider. After that, we're going to do a panel discussion in which we talk a little bit more about print and how people are still finding innovation and revenue in the print world. We have intentionally put a break into our day. So right at 12:50 Eastern time, what we'll do is about a 5-minute break, which is intentionally short, just long enough to stretch your legs or take a quick bio break. But at that time, if you stay engaged here at your computer, we're actually going to launch a poll, and we'd love for your feedback on the poll question that we have set up for today. Following the break, we're going to have another panel session where we talk to 2 folks from Newsday and Seattle Times and just how they're building on their subscription wins. And then, as we've done with each of the symposium's agendas each day, we round out the day with a spotlight on a particular industry. And it's going to be my pleasure to introduce Jim Baroni, who's going to talk to us about wine. And what better way to end the day than talking about wine? So what I'd like to do now, just on schedule, is go ahead and kick off with the introduction to our keynote address. And so I'm really fortunate to introduce you today to Ben Monty. He is the Google's director for the Google News Initiative. And what's fabulous about what he's going to share with us today is a lot of benchmarking data. They've taken the reader revenue from around the globe and pulled it together so we can see some key insights that can affect what you're doing today. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Really a pleasure to address one of my favorite topics, which is digital subscriptions for news organizations with a great group of people, including the team at Mather Economics, who I've worked with for many years, including at Google, but also previously at my time at the New York Times, where I helped lead the strategy project, lead the strategy team, and I worked with Mather on a pricing optimization project for print. As you heard in the introduction, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've learned from our Google News Initiative programs around reader revenue. And just for context here, the Google News Initiative was started back in March of 2018. It's part of a almost 20-year long set of activities around supporting and working with the news industry. But we launched a program kind of to put everything under one umbrella called the Google News Initiative back in March of 2018, the goal of which was to support the long-term sustainability of the news industry. You see some stats here. These were collected and they are valid up through June of last year. So the numbers are significantly greater, but we've spent 189 million of essentially a $300 million commitment over 3 years. And we'd spent 189 million in the first 2 years with more than 6,000 partners globally on projects ranging from how do we essentially combat misinformation within the broader ecosystem to how do we essentially leverage technological innovation to advance the capabilities of news organizations, to, of course, how do we essentially evolve and develop business models with a particular focus on reader revenue. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the lessons we've learned in the context of reader revenue. But before, again, I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we've thought about organizing some of our business model insights. And so what we've done is essentially interview and work with a lot of publishers over the course of those 2.5 years, now 3 years of the Google News Initiative. And we've worked with them to essentially focus on core aspects of their business, from audience development to reader revenue, advertising revenue, data, and product. And what we've done is we've tried to make that accessible and scalable to organizations of all types. And we put it under the umbrella of the G&I Digital Growth Program. And I'll provide the website to you at the end, but essentially this is easily searchable if you're on your computers now. G&I Digital Growth Program, select the region, and you'll come across these 5 topics. And what you can do is kind of click into each of the topics, and you'll discover a series of playbooks, interactive exercises, workshops, and labs. And so the playbook we developed for reader revenue in context or in partnership with MATHER, with Pete Doucette, actually, who you heard from Philadelphia Inquirer, with the Membership Puzzle Project, with News Revenue Hub, lots of experts that have worked on newspaper and news organization digital consumer revenue. And we pulled that together into a canonical point of view on how you can essentially build, grow, develop a reader revenue business. And we've done that for several of these additional topics. We've also launched interactive exercises to essentially help organizations think through some of the strategic and tactical questions and concerns they have. You heard the discussion about benchmarks. Well, we have included in our reader revenue suite a benchmarking exercise on the kind of 11 key benchmarks that are critical for a reader revenue business. And you essentially can enter your information based on your particular business, and you're going to see whether you're outperforming or underperforming versus comparable news organizations. And it combines that with a set of recommendations on how to essentially improve those. We also have a series of workshops, both live and recorded. We've gone through reader revenue. We've just also launched audience development and are going to be launching advertising soon. But all those are available online, and you can essentially participate over a period of time. Again, it brings to life with specific publishers, experts, and Google the kind of lessons, examples, et cetera, similar to essentially this MATHER symposium, but just spread out over a longer period of time, and obviously a slightly different take on things. And then finally, we have a series of labs, which essentially are cohort-based programs working with publishers and experts like MATHER, who ran our labs program in Latin America over, frankly, 12 months with organizations to essentially get really deep into their businesses to drive meaningful progress and value. So because today is the subscriptions lifecycle symposium, I am going to talk to you a little bit about reader revenue, and in particular, some of the lessons. So what we know from reader revenue, and this goes back to the work we've done on our various labs with almost 100 news organizations, and with our workshops, which are more than 1,000 organizations, not to mention the time that I took helping launch the New York Times subscription paywall back in 2009 and 10. And then helping to grow that for my time for at least the next 6 years before I joined Google. What we know is really there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Every news organization has a different relationship with its users, with its community, and frankly has different capabilities and approaches. All of those essentially, all that subtlety needs to be accounted for, and essentially taken into account as they develop their particular approach. However, we do know that there are some core principles. So I'm going to walk through the core principles with you, and I'll recap them at the end. So first core principle is about defining the market opportunity. And really, this is kind of putting your business hat on and trying to understand, again, what market are we really competing in, and what is the potential for number of actual paying users, as well as what's the average revenue we get from them on an ongoing basis. What we see all too often in some of our conversations with publishers is they haven't necessarily defined the right market opportunity or have used the proper data to be able to assess that. And so if you don't have that sense of what you're essentially trying to solve for upfront, you're never going to be successful. So what we recommend is essentially 5 key metrics to be able to do this work. And there's lots of different ways to size the market, but one is just taking the number of monthly active users, getting a sense of actually what that growth trajectory is on an ongoing basis for those users, what your average revenue per user could be based on things like conversion rate and churn. So what percentage of your actual users are essentially going to convert to start on an ongoing basis? What's the average price, taking into account subscriptions, promotions, the bundle essentially that they're signing up for? if you have a subscription, you also want to think about what's the advertising ARPU that might be associated with potentially their increased engagement, and then what is their retention or churn. We have as I said, we have a tool that we developed, which again is not meant for the most sophisticated users, but is a really good way to essentially just estimate some of these numbers and frankly, play around with some of the relationships. You know, the insight here, or the approach here, was let's think about designing something that's as simple as a mortgage calculator, or how much house can I afford, if you've seen those on bankrate.com or NewYorkTimes.com or other organizations, just to give you a sense of how much are we talking about here. This allows you to essentially enter your monthly active users, the growth rate, the conversion rate, and in this case, it's contributions as opposed to subscriptions, and then allows you to kind of move the slider around to essentially see what the opportunity is and what the kind of potential gaps might be versus where your baseline is. And again, part of this is understanding what the relationships are between and among the various variables, such that essentially you can set a clear target for yourself, understand this, and again, identify which priority variables you want to focus on. So once you've generally assessed the market size and the market opportunity, you need to start with understanding your readers' needs. So again, one of the kind of downsides, so to speak, of advertising for many years for the industry is that kind of our paying customer, for the most part, has been an organization, or has been advertisers who haven't necessarily approached the journalism in the same way that a reader would. Advertisers aren't looking to develop kind of loyalty on a daily basis with the news, comparing it with all kinds of different approaches. They have a whole other set of considerations. So with a shift towards consumer revenue, we deeply need to understand what our readers want. So what do they want? What do they need? What are their core behaviors in terms of news and content consumption, or news consumption, but also content consumption more broadly? One of the interesting insights from just the digital world is, when you're essentially introducing a subscription digitally and asking people even not to pay, but spend their time with you, you're competing with not just other news organizations and newspapers, but with other digital services, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and the like. It's all part of essentially how do you fit within their overall digital diet, and how are you perceived in the context of people's willingness to pay for you. Likewise, how do they engage with your content, and not what and how much would they be willing to pay for your content. So we have a tool here that we would like to introduce, or we introduced to news organizations. It's essentially built on the back of GA360. It's called News Consumer Insights. And it essentially pulls in your GA360 data. It was designed specifically with news organizations in mind. And it breaks up your readers into three segments: casual readers, who are readers who read less than 2 articles a day. You've got loyal readers, which are between kind of, or not articles, but page views. Loyal readers, which are between 3 and 10, and then brand lovers, which are above that. You may want to check the specifics for on the website for that, but essentially it gives you a sense of what's your actual distribution by segment, how much are their page views, what percentage of page views are read by each of them, and here we have percentage of ad revenue, which is a proxy based on some estimates of RPM and the like. And this essentially gives you a really good understanding of, frankly, how your readers are broken up, and you can start thinking about potentially tying survey data to these segments by asking information about willingness to pay, as well as traffic, to get a sense of, or traffic consumption, to get a sense of, casual readers. Are they likely to be a good prospect for you to convert to becoming subscribers? What are their needs? What are their behaviors? Likewise, loyal readers, are they likely good prospects for conversion? And then brand lovers, which presumably would be your most likely prospects for conversion. What portion of them actually are paying for a subscription for the ones who are, how do you make sure you're kind of surprising and delighting them on an ongoing basis such that you retain them and potentially even can introduce additional value-added services or increase price for them? And then for the ones in the Bride and Lover segment who are not paying subscribers, what is going to keep them from subscribing and what might motivate them to subscribe? Essentially, orienting around these segments can be a really useful mechanism for, again, conducting ongoing focus groups, surveys, and the like. So once you've identified what your users' needs are by segments, as I said, you need to specifically understand what their attitudes and behaviors are vis-a-vis these 4 categories: product and content, value-added benefits, marketing positioning, and user experience. And then most importantly, build a value proposition that is designed with those users in mind. So we have a quick exercise that you, maybe not so quick, but an exercise that we find useful to engage with our publishers on it, and frankly ask them to spend time with their editorial, marketing, and cross-functional teams as they're essentially thinking about strengthening their digital subscriptions model. And again, many of these questions are kind of basic. It's really the time and effort and frankly decision and choices that organizations make around these that differentiate this from being just another activity to one that actually drives meaningfully the strategy. So in the context of product and content, what do your readers want? What do you currently offer, and what's the gap? And then how do you essentially close that gap? The examples we've had organizations, I was talking with an organization, a mid-sized news organization, they've identified that their readers want a meaningful amount of local sports coverage. And they have a good amount of sports coverage, but it really only is once a week on kind of high school and college. And the readers essentially, particularly not just readers generically, but readers who have demonstrated a high willingness to pay, have indicated that they actually want daily briefings. They don't need to be deep, but email briefings on essentially what's going on during the preseason in terms of actually setting up the teams and setting everyone up for success. And that's a period of time, and then there are other periods of time throughout the season where they're really interested in kind of concentrated content. And so the thought is, should we actually assign a reporter to cover this and create this as either subscriber only content or introduce it as part of our existing sports coverage? And again, the series of conversations that essentially organizations will need to go through lead to good and productive positive relationships between ultimately recognizing what the reader wants, what they're willing to pay for, what's the journalism or experience that's needed to get that, and then communicating that actively such that you're able to get people to convert and retain on a much more active basis. So once you've developed a clear value proposition around those needs, actually, I should say there's another exercise which is built by Strategizer. This is used by Membership Puzzle Project, which is an expert in contributions and memberships. But it's a good, simple rubric for getting at how do you essentially do something, arrive at an approach that's differentiated. So our products and services help this particular user segment. You could say prospective brand lovers who like sports, who want to find out more information about the preseason selection process for local college football by reducing this pain, in this case by preventing them from not having this information, and by enabling their user gain. So by providing them with daily information that can help them become that much more knowledgeable about a passion point. So once you've identified your specific value proposition, the goal then is essentially to be able to create a reader revenue program that communicates this simply and powerfully. So Chronica and El Litoral were organizations that we worked with in our contributions labs in South America. They recognize that essentially, as many organizations do, what differentiates their content is this kind of orientation around journalism, which is original holds power to account. So the idea is they developed some language and they communicated it throughout all their marketing messaging and their overall brand messaging, as well as kind of subscriptions activations messaging, which was, we need the support of people to put responsible, original, and unconditional journalism into practice. It's time to help each other. So this speaks to the individual user and speaks to kind of that civic responsibility. Likewise, El Litoral had a similar language. We build El Litoral together. We are a benchmark for quality and truth, a diversity of voices, and credible, accessible information. Be part of the millions who trust our content. So there was some social signaling included in that language, be part of the millions. So you want to be part of a group. There was some indication of core value proposition, which is quality, truth, diversity, credibility, and accessibility, and obviously information. And then again, some kind of notion of responsibility for we build El Litoral together. Those are just a couple of the messages that you could approach. Others tend to be a little bit more kind of value and transaction oriented, but the most successful organizations have been really both simple in the language, make it really clear what you get, kind of from an emotional perspective, and then also really clear from a functional perspective, if you're familiar with that kind of marketing language. 5 is make it easy for readers to pay and enjoy your content. So really, this is about kind of just making it as simple and seamless as possible. Ideally, one-click purchase, though of course nothing is as simple as that. I will say we have launched a product which is relevant for organizations that are kind of larger, and hopefully we'll be able to scale that further. But there are many tools out there, not just Google tools, to essentially reduce the friction. So our product is called Subscribe with Google. The goal is essentially to optimize conversion with a low friction and secure payments flow, improving engagement by keeping readers signed in across the web. And then it allows publishers to own the reader relationship with access to readers' email. You heard in the intro, Pete Doucette's objective to essentially have grow from 1% of known readers to 15% of readers. Well, one way to do that, obviously, is to ask for email addresses for newsletters and registration and the like. But again, that's super important to be able to make that experience as seamless as possible. And some of the, frankly, the lessons that we've had from some of our experience through labs is ask publishers to run tests to reduce the number of steps required for a user to make a purchase. What would happen if you essentially make the purchase upfront with one click, but collect a lot of the user information after the purchase is made, either within that flow or over email over a period of time. And there are trade-offs, but the general lesson is the fewer steps you ask a user to engage in, the more likely they are to actually convert. So lesson 6 is, once you've kind of developed the value proposition, understood your reader, you really need to get the entire organization focused on those unified goals. For many years, news organizations have been, as I said, focused on advertising revenue on the business side, and kind of said, okay, that's the business side's responsibility. And the newsroom is going to focus on what it does well, which is journalism. Now, reader revenue essentially creates an incentive to, frankly, have everybody in the organization, business side, newsroom, et cetera, working together to essentially create something amazing for readers such that they're willing to pay, and you're able to build a business around it, which can essentially go back into supporting the newsroom. That is a highly, I guess, complicated activity, changing the culture of news organizations, building up skills for reader centricity, product perspective, et cetera. But having ground both indications and urging from the bottom up as well as from the top down to focus on reader revenue, that really makes the whole difference. So we found the most successful partners on our lab programs, for example, have been ones that have not only had like a key champion at the kind of the middle and senior management level, or middle management level and kind of the operating level, but also have had a key champion at, frankly, the board in case of public companies, but also the CEO, to really be able to say, you know what, we are a reader revenue focused business, and we need to orient all of our efforts around creating an amazing experience. That's something you've seen. Again, the New York Times isn't always the most, relevant example because they are so unique and so well funded in so many ways. Having said that, there are some dimensions of their experience which I think are particularly relevant. In this case, there was essentially a report that was written by many senior executives, and including kind of championed by the publisher and CEO, which said by the year 2020, this is back in 2016, we will have achieved a certain number of, well, first of all, we are a reader revenue business. We are going to achieve a certain amount of digital revenue. I think it was $800 million. And more recently, they've said we want to generate 10 million subscriptions. Now, having kind of been part of the many decisions of the Times for many years, before that, there was always this tension between kind of print and digital, advertising and consumer revenue, and frankly, it created a lot of organizational tie-ups. When that report came out, combined with kind of an insight that said 2% of readers are generating 90% of our revenue because those people are consumer or subscribers, kind of created a real awakening within the organization that we really need to get everybody aligned on how do you understand your readers, how do you essentially create an amazing experience, and how do you essentially build your business with that in mind. And you've seen the results from the Times. If many organizations have made similar, or many organizations have made similar adjustments and have seen similarly, great digital subscriptions growth. So the final lesson here is just once you've kind of made that commitment, benchmark, test, and optimize. So this list of metrics is a list that we've identified with our various partners, including Mather, that suggests across the funnel, growing your audience, engaging your audience, converting your readers, and retaining your readers. These are the most important metrics to understand and prioritize. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will point you to the tool that I referenced before, which is the user funnel diagnostic. It allows you to essentially enter in, you can see here your data, this is kind of user entered, compare it to the industry benchmark, indicate kind of how well you're doing on a kind of green, yellow, red perspective, and then actually based on that you scroll down and it will tell you what are some of the recommendations you need to follow through. So page speed score, this is based on a Google tool which essentially assesses how quickly your page loads. Fortunately, the industry benchmark is 55. That is fairly low in the context of page speed in general, mobile and web. But we've known from our experience in advertising, for every 1 second improvement in page score, you have a double-digit decrease in the number of people who abandon the page. So just imagine the increases in page speed score, how that will actually improve the customer experience, willingness to pay, and obviously reduce the likelihood of churn. So in summary, these are the lessons that we've derived from our labs and our workshops in partnership with Mather and others. One is define and understand the market opportunity, so you know what you're playing with, frankly, and what success could be. 2 is really get into deeply understanding your readers' needs, both from a quantitative and qualitative perspective, both your product, but also how they're engaging with digital news and content overall. 3 is building the value proposition around those needs. So from content to user experience and product and the like, really understand that deeply, and that takes time and one-on-one time, not just survey time. 4, communicate the reader revenue program simply and powerfully through marketing messages, and frankly, the most important message, most important mechanism, which is product, which in this case is the content and the journalism, but also the product experience. 5, make it easy for readers to pay and enjoy your content. So just optimize for a simple and seamless and quick user experience and purchase experience. 6 is focus the whole organization on this unified set of goals around reader revenue. And then finally, just benchmark, test, and optimize on an ongoing basis. So thank you. I will, there's a quick set of URLs which you can check out, g.co/GNI digital growth and goo/ gle/data tools, which will link you to News Consumer Insights and our other companion tools, real-time content insights, as well as our data benchmarking and maturity survey. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to answer questions. I think Nikki is going to take it away from here.
I'm here. Thank you, Ben, for sharing that and for putting these links up as well. You've covered a lot of information. 7 helpful tips are strong enough for us to make sure that we're going back and looking at this afterwards, because I think it's really, really good that you've shared this. So just a reminder to our audience, you can ask questions of Ben that I can try to funnel his way by using the chat feature in the bottom of Zoom. But as you just get sort of a quick breath there, Ben, I want to start by asking a question that we had come in, which really speaks to just the size, right, of Google, and you guys doing this large of a benchmarking, project. With the Google News Initiative, have there been any publishers or examples that you can give of folks who have really used digital platforms in order to drive, actual print growth? So thinking about hard copies, et cetera, because we think of Google, we think of digital, and I know a lot of the data comes from that, but certainly you're working with so many publishers from around the globe that we thought there might be a good example that you might be able to share.
Yeah. So the primary, just off the top of my head, the primary use case that publishers have had for driving print growth has been through kind of Google. Well, one is a Google paid advertising, which essentially, like any organization, you can use Google AdWords or Google Display Network to essentially buy ads. And when somebody searches for the East Hampton Times, you'll have the promotion that will be upfront on the top of the Google search results. Likewise, if you've optimized your site well for Google, you should come up when people are essentially searching for that. It was and is a meaningful channel and a very cost-effective channel in general for customer subscription acquisition. So that's kind of a primary mechanism, and it does require something in the way of kind of either if you're using an agency or building that capability in-house, does require some kind of Google Ads capability and knowledge and know-how. So that's kind of the primary way that I think. The other approach, obviously, is when you're just optimized for SEO, for just news and the website and your own, you want to make sure, and this is within your own decision as opposed to Google, but making sure that you're designing thinking about the experience of a user coming from Google, who's going to be a more itinerant user, and think about what you're trying to do. If you want to be able to essentially optimize them to convert into a physical subscription, you can do things like make your print subscription acquisition button really prominent on the article page or the home page, or create house ads in the right rail or within the article itself to be able to drive people to subscription. So again, think about Google as both a paid and free/organic content discovery mechanism, similar to the way you might think about kind of placement on a print newsstand, and think about what are the vehicles for getting those people to actually engage with your print product and hopefully make a purchase.
Okay, great. Those are some great ideas. So thank you for sharing those. One of the things that I think is really interesting, and you hit this right from the very beginning, right, which is know what market you're actually in and defining that. And that's an exercise, quite frankly, that a lot of organizations have to go through, because I think they might know, but ultimately working through like that tool that you gave with Strategizer of kind of defining that was helpful. One of the things you mentioned was the obvious consumer and the focus there on how you fit into their overall digital diet. So describing, how much are they spending on Netflix, or are they also an Amazon subscriber, and where you fit into that. And the question I have is really around whether or not publishers and these organizations who are out there today in our audience should think of themselves as competing with Netflix and Amazon. On one side, you can make the argument that of course they could, because you're a consumer, and just because you're in a local market doesn't mean that you're not paying for that digitally. And then of course the flip side is the price point, for example, that they can set is going to be so different than what you can, because they have scale. And so how do you at Google start to think about that as a competitive set for particularly some of these local publishers?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's no one answer for organizations. So the New York Times is a better position to maybe think about Netflix as a competitor, not for entertainment or movies, obviously, but again, for maybe, well, actually not for movies, but for, just generally thinking about the way that you would spend money on digital versus a local news organization. Ultimately, anything that's coming out of a publisher's wallet or purse, a publisher user's wallet or purse on an ongoing basis needs to be kind of evaluated against all other expenses that fit within that kind of general category. If news organizations can do a good job of kind of creating a separate category for, oh, this is about civic responsibility or community or, something that's distinctive, they create more differentiation and make it less of a less of a substitute for Netflix. And that requires having a differentiated enough product. And I know this is a little complicated, but Netflix essentially created kind of a new category that initially was essentially about a more effective alternative to what you're spending every weekend on Blockbuster when you're going to the movie. And it was cheaper, it was more efficient, but now it's essentially bigger than that. It is essentially a competitor to your cable and your other expenses. So they kind of went from one smaller market, which was video rentals, to a bigger market, which was essentially all movies, entertainment, and television. It's also competing with broadcast. So you've got to figure out what is your relevant kind of competitive set initially, and don't be hemmed in by your traditional approach of just thinking, oh, well, I'm competing with my local newspaper, or I'm competing with my local broadcaster. You're in some ways trying to create a new category, and you have to just make sure you're creating something that's unique, distinctive, and special enough that, frankly, people are willing to pay not just $7 or $15 or whatever, but the most important step is getting somebody to pay from zero to a penny. That's the kind of biggest hurdle that many organizations face. And once you're past that, then it's essentially on you to prove out that what you're asking a user to pay for it is worth their time and money.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, thank you for that. One of the things that I was thinking about when you were showing just the Google News Initiative and how it's so important is that what it really gives us is a lot of this benchmarking data. And so going back to sort of definitions, when you were showing the chart that was almost like the mortgage calculator in a way that was a simple dashboard for people to use, you were looking at things like number of active users and the growth among them and conversion rates. And one of the things I was wondering was, do each of these publishers typically come in with different definitions for that, right? So a conversion rate could be conversion to subscription, where they start giving you that first sort of penny, or it could be conversion to giving you first party data so that you can put them into your funnel and nurture them. Or same thing with active users. Maybe some people have defined that as coming back to their site, 3 times in 1 month, where perhaps someone else is defining it very differently. So how do you reconcile that data in terms of comparison? Are you guys actually setting what the definition of active is or conversion so that you can get a little bit more apples to apples in that?
Yeah, no, that's a really important question, one that's given us a lot of headaches. Everybody has a different definition of what a user is, what an active is. I actually, as I was walking through even the definition of the segments, casual users, loyal users, and brand lovers, I think I even messed up the definition. So it is hard to get that right. We do and work really hard to kind of set standardized definitions, certainly for the approaches that we're using and the benchmarking that we're doing. But as Matt will attest on our engagements on labs, as Pete will attest on our engagement in APAC and North America, getting publishers to essentially get and adapt their data to reach those particular definitions was really hard because everyone uses a different definition, or maybe not different, but not everyone, but a lot of people use lots of different definitions. I think it would be an amazing thing for the industry overall to agree upon some kind of standard definitions for what some of these key variables are, such that we all do and are able to essentially do apples to apples comparison. There are a couple of things that we're working on. One is through Google, through the News Consumer Insights, we essentially released a tag, News Tag Manager, which essentially does create the same, allows you to essentially input Java code and JavaScript onto your site, such that the definitions of audience that are being captured are consistent with the kind of canonical definitions, and allows you to essentially make sure that you're having the appropriate comparisons. And then likewise, Mather is working with Medill on a kind of project to essentially, get deeper into the definitions of user funnel and the like, and we're working with them on that as well. And we make our definitions available in public so that hopefully people are using the same approaches, and again, can compare things apples to apples.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And yesterday or actually, I guess it was on Friday, it feels like yesterday, we had the opportunity to hear more about the initiative with Northwestern University. So that does go hand in hand, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So one of the things that I just want to wrap up with one more question is one that is really important, that was a tip that you mentioned, but I'm glad that you also said it's quite complex, because I was thinking aspirational, which was the one of unifying goals. And certainly by saying, okay, we're going to focus on reader revenue, that becomes a little bit easier, because then you take your editorial team, maybe the business side that's focused a little bit more on simplifying payments and that sort of thing, and you get them rallying around the same thing. But I guess the question that I have, and I don't know, how many people have shared this, and I'd be curious if you know this, there's data now that is available that can show, click to conversion or path to conversion, that shows some of the types of content that is really generating that. Are most of the publishers you're working with showing that kind of data to their newsrooms as part of this shift to being able to focus on, reader revenue and aligning those goals?
Yeah, I mean, there are many organizations are, well, I want to address two things. One is just the data that's being used, and then the other is differentiation between kind of data and culture. In terms of the first question, many organizations are sharing that data about kind of what articles lead to a particular conversion. That is certainly, so I gave the example of the organization I was talking to, kind of a good mid-sized city paper that's been really successful in digital subscriptions, a member of one of our labs. Talked to the publisher last week, and she was saying, oh yes, in fact, we know that sports content is really important to our conversion decision. And that is based on some of the data that they had. Mather has provided some of that for some of these organizations, but there are lots of organizations that kind of provide that technology. So many they're just very clear that that shouldn't get in the way of editorial and journalistic judgment. Editors and reporters need to be, making assessments based on their training and their experience as to what is important for their user in light of the overall mission of the organization. But data around, oh, this is actually important for subscribers, or important to create a compelling value proposition to subscribers, that's information they can actually incorporate into some of their editorial decisions without, again, compromising the journalism, which should remain sacrosanct. The second part that I do want to just touch on this as the last point, which is, I think it's really easy or it's really tempting, let's say, to focus on kind of data, information, et cetera, as the kind of key to unlocking value and subscription success. But time and time again, I'm just convinced it's all about the people, it's all about their commitment, and it's all about choices that we're making, not just to focus on subscriptions, but to not focus on other things. Creating, like 1 or 2 or 3 experts who really have the knowledge and are advocates for reader revenue and that capability, and having them work collaboratively, empowering them, elevating that message, and frankly, breaking the silos across all parts of the organization, newsroom, marketing, product, et cetera. That's much more effective, and it may be messy, but giving people a goal and getting them in a room and just saying, you're going to focus on this for the next 6 months, that will lead to untold and frankly unimagined outcomes that frankly are required for ongoing sustainability and success for a news organization.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for being here and kicking off the 3rd day of our symposium. Great stuff that you have unpacked here for us, and we just appreciate you joining us and sharing everything today.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
Great. At this point, I want to shift gears and introduce you to our next speaker, who is the Senior Vice President of Insider, Selma Stern. And she's going to join us to talk a little bit about how they have just had phenomenal subscription growth, and of course, the revenue that follows that, due in part to a large organizational shift. And she's joining us from Berlin, so it's getting a little bit later where she's at. We thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome, Selma.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for this kind introduction. And thank you, MATHER, for inviting me to speak here today. I've been working with MATHER, or we've been working with MATHER as an organization for a little over a year now. And MATHER has helped us really quantify some of the things that I would like to talk to you about today. So without further ado, I would like to talk to you today about success factors for subscriptions and reader revenue. We've seen pretty tremendous subscriber growth in 2020, and we're seeing sustained subscriber growth in 2021, which is very good news. And I would just like to share a little bit of perspective or introspection around why we think we've seen success that purportedly has outperformed some standard market metrics, which we're very happy about. Just a few words of introduction on the business section of Insider, as we refer to our business section now. Our subscriptions product is still focused mostly on the business side of things. What was previously known as Business Insider reaches around 130 million people each month. We have a strong international presence, and we're read by mostly business leaders, and I'll get into our exact demographics in a little bit. Now, a little bit of disambiguation around our name. You've probably heard of us as Business Insider. Now that we are branching out and growing our newsroom to cover a lot of different areas beyond business, we have dropped the business from our name and are now just Insider. Here is some context around this very fast subscription growth that we've seen over the last 2 years when you look at this chart. A little bit of context around this. So Insider as a company has been around for about 14 years now. Subscriptions wasn't historically our focus. It's always been a digital only company, so there's no print component to what we do. But it was an advertising revenue supported business for the longest time. And for the last 3 years or so, 3 years ago, we started with a small experiment called consumer subscriptions that has blossomed into a great and growing business model. So what's important here is we're seeing sustained growth into 2021. So this slight bump that you're seeing towards the second half of this chart, really, those are the COVID months. So those are a few months where we had double-digit monthly growth rates for our active subscribers, which was just phenomenal. But this growth is continuing, and this last month here that was phenomenally successful due to our Dobrik investigation, which you may have heard of. That's this last bar here, and that's last March. So what I want to talk to you about today is basically why is that? Why do we think that is? And in a way, this could be a one-page presentation, if we're honest, because the number one reason for that always has been and always will be great journalism. The quotes on the left of this chart are responses to a very simple question that we asked our subscribers, and that is, why did you subscribe? The vast majority said, because I want to read your articles. It's that simple. I want to, or I need to. For us as a business publication, they very often say, I need to read this for my job, so I will subscribe. And that's the reason why we've even throughout the pandemic, invested in growing our newsroom, because the more of that great must-read journalism we produce, the better this model works. But as we all know, it's not that simple. When you go to all kinds of subscriptions conferences that I'm sure we've all attended, you will always hear that you need to do lots of A/B testing, and dynamic pricing is probably a good idea. You need to see that your user experience is as frictionless as possible, and so on and so forth. Now, all of these things are notoriously difficult to implement. And this is a screenshot here of a great 2-minute video clip talking about the New York Times journey to an agile organization. And for us, we think, we're far from perfect. Our company motto is to get better every day, and there are still lots of tests we haven't done, and lots of metrics probably that we haven't looked at yet. Lots of users that are not getting the exact right price point at the right time. But I think there are 3 things broadly that we did right at Insider. And I want to talk about all 3 in this session today. First of all, I think the clearer your value proposition, i.e. if you differentiate yourself clearly enough from the competition, this will give you an edge and help drive subscriptions. Secondly, operational excellence, of course, is important, and I think for the subscriptions business, it's striving towards a somewhat intelligent paywall, or an intelligent system, really, because it's not just about the paywall, it's also about retention, as we've heard today already. You need to work on a system that will continuously evolve. I mean, I've just mentioned the New York Times. Obviously, they're the gold standard for our industry in so many ways, but on their earnings call this quarter, they said that one of the major factors in their success is a fully, automated dynamic paywall that is supported by an algorithm that is constantly learning and evolving. And thirdly, people. I'm hearing an echo. I wonder if everyone else is too. Okay, now it's great. Perfect. And the third topic, I think, is people. And we've heard this in the keynote address too. In a digital organization, you need a culture that supports speed and autonomy. And I think we hear these buzzwords like agile and digital and speed and autonomy very frequently. But I would like to underscore here that I think in the subscriptions world, it's a necessity. So diving a little bit deeper into the first aspect here, strategy. At Insider, I think we set ourselves apart, and we're obviously, in terms of subscriptions, a much smaller organization than or a smaller operation than some of our better known competitors still. But we're seeing these phenomenal growth rates, we think, because we have a very unique style when it comes to business news, and that's also what our subscribers are telling us. These are again some quotes from our existing subscribers, who are telling us that they like the fact that our journalism is useful to them. It's geared towards business professionals. Our growth strategy is, we always refer to it as verticalized. So we try to build our newsroom and build our coverage industry vertical by industry vertical. It's written in a very accessible, concise, and visual way. Every single article starts with 3 bullet points that summarize the story. So if you tend to read all tech coverage, for example, if you want to get up to date on all tech in the morning, you don't have to read every single article that we write, because that can be quite a lot, but you can read the bullet points and be up to date, and people love that. And then lastly, we have a fun and unpretentious and simple tone to our reporting, which is also something that readers appreciate and keep telling us that they can't find anywhere else. And now that seems to resonate with an audience that is mostly busy professionals from various industries. So 26% of our subscribers work in the tech industry, almost 20 work in finance, and that also roughly mirrors our story output, so the composition of our newsroom essentially. And I would really like to reiterate a point that was made earlier today, that understanding this is absolutely critical, because otherwise you'll end up boiling the ocean and trying to please everyone with your product, which hardly anyone can do. Now, in terms of operations, as I've mentioned previously, this is an ongoing journey. This is never perfect. It's probably not even perfect at the New York Times yet, but it's just important to have a clear roadmap and to be on this, to embark on this journey. And this is where we work together with MATHER a great deal, because obviously data is a huge component of anything that resembles an intelligent or fully rule-based and automated paywall. So at the moment, and this has, we see this in our conversion rates that have improved dramatically over the last year, is that the ongoing optimization work of aligning price, copy, design to various user segments, be it by the section that they like to read, or where they are, or what device they use, has proven extremely valuable. One day we would like to have a self-optimizing paywall that with an algorithm behind it that will make pricing, copy, design decisions on the spot, basically depending on who's hitting the paywall on what article. And the second aspect of an intelligent paywall, as we like to call it, is a dynamic meter. We've started initial experiments with a paywall on non-premium stories. I'll have to explain a little bit of background here. Our paywall at Insider is we use a freemium model, which is unusual in the United States, but we found it to work better for our purposes a few years ago, and now we're experimenting with a dynamic meter on top, which is really a metered model with a few exceptions to the main rule, but that also one day should ideally evolve into completely dynamic monetization, where essentially a machine decides how to monetize a specific user, be it through advertising only, because maybe they're very unlikely to subscribe, or by showing them a paywall at their first or second session if we know that they are likely to subscribe. So that's the end state there. We're at the beginning of this journey, but it's already paying off quite significantly. And now the third aspect here, which I call people, is something I would like to spend a little bit more time on, because I think this is absolutely critical and often overlooked in a lot of organizations. Like culture is very often overlooked in a lot of different contexts. There was a study once, I remember saying, that most mergers actually fail not because there are no because the business transaction didn't make sense, but because the cultures didn't match. So why is everyone talking about speed and autonomy and agility in the subscriptions business, in the digital subscriptions business mainly? So one difference, I think, between the sort of physical subscriptions world, and that could be print or another physical product, and digital subscriptions, is that the steps in the value chain in physical subscriptions sort of happen sequentially, right? Your newsroom will write articles, then the paper gets produced, then logistics come into play, and finally it's sold either at the newsstand or in the case of subscriptions, it's delivered to the door. All of that happens sequentially, whereas in digital subscriptions, every single aspect of that value chain, production and sales and ad sales, it all happens simultaneously, and it all happens within the same tech stack. So if you think that through, that must mean by definition that in this digital world we have to collaborate more closely and to collaborate faster. So another aspect of this is, and we saw this in 2020, that rapid growth kind of reinforces that challenge and that need to be to work in agile, fast, cross-functional groups. As we were growing, and as Insider and Axel Springer, our parent company, decided to invest more and more into a growing subscriptions business, it became impossible to run all operational decisions through leadership. So we needed to get faster. Also, it created an imbalance towards shorter-term wins, but things like retention actually require, they tend to be more complex, they tend to be more cross-functional, so they require cross-functional collaboration as well. And then lastly, if the marketing team, the product team, the editorial team, each have their own planning processes and each have their own priorities with respect to subscriptions, it will be a very arduous and long planning process, when really they're all after the same goals, which tend to be acquisition, retention, and a couple of other things. So that is why we decided to organize our day-to-day operational work not by functional teams. Those are still around. We still have a business development team, editorial, engineering, product, and so on and so forth. But goal setting and the day-to-day operational work happens in these cross-functional teams here. And for example, our acquisition, retention, pricing, and systems and data. These are sets of priorities that we all share that are absolutely cross-functional in nature. And before I close, I would like to show you just a few examples of these cross-functional projects that would have taken a lot longer, or maybe wouldn't have happened if we didn't have these cross-functional teams. On the acquisition side, we recently implemented an ad-free offer term, just to see if there was an appetite for an ad-free offer. Turns out there is. I can talk about that if there's interest. And on the retention side, we did a Black Friday sale, a Black Friday deal, which also required the marketing team to come up with a marketing strategy. It required a product team to implement this. Our business intelligence team thought about the different price points, and all of that work happened within one group with almost no alignment meetings. Thirdly, pricing. We're starting to differentiate our prices depending on price sensitivity, and that obviously also touches product and marketing and business intelligence. And then lastly, on the systems and data side, we implemented a marketing attribution model so that we don't have to rely on what the platforms tell us our costs per acquisition are with paid marketing, but so that we actually know what's going on. And this was also a very cross-functional project, starting with marketing and data products, data engineering, and lots of different teams. So the last thing I'll say is there is maybe one silver bullet, which is great journalism. I still think even if you have terrible user experience and just one price point and everything's very simple, if you're offering something that people think they have to read, they will ultimately subscribe. But on the business and product and tech side of things, many small changes really do add up to meaningful growth. And doing many of these small things right requires a lot of agility and speed and sophisticated technology. Thank you. Back to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Selma, for taking us through that. Just a couple questions for you, and we appreciate you sharing everything in there. One of the things I want to start with was what you started with just off the top. You did a nice overview of the transformation that you guys have gone through, even from a brand, right? From being Business Insider to Insider. Just curious, especially since your core focus was still listed as, useful business information, if you have attributed any of the success in your recent growth and subscriptions to the brand shift and the focus there.
So maybe this is not the answer you expect to hear, but we haven't, and that's kind of deliberate, because we keep hearing again and again from our subscribers that they don't really care about the brand, they don't really care about the name. What they care about is their tech news or their finance news or even their politics coverage or whatever it may be. So, but I think on the other hand, on the marketing side and on the branding side, having Insider is just a great brand name. You can do so much with it. You can be anything Insider. So, so that's why, from a communication standpoint, it can only help us.
Right. Well, thank you for taking us through the people part. I know you spent intentionally a little bit longer time there. And one of the things that I know is that you guys have grown as a team. So the shift that you guys have made has not just been reorganization, it's also adding new individuals, right? And by walking through sort of these cross-functional teams, one of the questions that's come up is if you can give us any kind of examples of things that have been successful in those cross-functional teams, like curious about how you're looking at your attribution model. Like, for example, are you working with various platforms and see that a cross-functional team has really had success in, say, Facebook versus another team? And if you have any examples like that that have sort of view through conversions that you can share with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to. So I think the attribution model is actually an excellent example of how cross-functional collaboration enabled us to make tremendous progress that we wouldn't have been able to make otherwise. So what the attribution model does is it essentially looks at click paths. So in a traditional kind of simplistic world, you would look at how many people click on your ad, how much and how many convert off of that ad, how much money did you spend, and then what is that in combination. The platforms will tell you so and so many people saw your ad, and the truth is always somewhere in the middle. So we basically looked at if someone converts off of an article they saw on Facebook, let's say, what did the click path look like before that? Did they interact with us only on Facebook? Did they interact with us on other platforms or on our owned and operated site? So in the end, so that in the end we can see, and this is obviously very, very complex data behind that, but so that we can see what portion of someone's path to conversion can be attributed to one particular platform. And that we needed to work on this cross-functionally, because the marketing team obviously needs this for their day-to-day work, right? They needed to tell us and to tell the data engineering teams that worked on the kind of pipes of this in the background what they actually wanted to get out of that, whereas our business intelligence teams needed to think through the reporting, and our data engineers had to do the kind of wiring in the background and Google Analytics and BigQuery and such. So that's why this would have taken way longer if we hadn't just thrown people in a room, said this is the objective and go figure it out.
Right. I love the insight that you provided when you were suggesting that, when you think about print, it is almost a linear model, but when we're talking about digital, it's really simultaneous between the ad tech and all of the offers that are going out and the speed at which it needs to move. Obviously, you guys have engaged the editorial team, and one of the questions that's come in has asked, are there the same folks from the editorial team who are working on acquisition and retention? So they're looking at both of those metrics, or similar to how oftentimes on the business side, those two are very separated because they have very different initiatives. Have your editorial staff separated in that sense and focus area as well?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we have a strategy team on the editorial side, who are the link to the business and product, the business and product and tech teams who work with us in these cross-functional groups. Now, the vast majority of writers and editors does not worry about acquisition or retention. Their goals are net new subscribers, so that factors in churn. We set our growth objectives every year based on our total active subscriber count and net additions, not just gross additions. But we did actually look at whether certain types of articles are better at driving acquisition or retention. Turns out they're not. Turns out that articles that drive a lot of new subscriptions also tend to be articles that our existing subscribers engage with. So we asked ourselves that same question, and we found a relatively clear answer.
That's great. And thank you for really answering the next question that we had, which was around, well, how much time is the editorial staff of the newsroom actually spending on these particular things? And you mentioned the vast majority of the journalists aren't, but you've got those groups that are. So that's helpful to know.
Right. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. I think this is one of those things where we've got lots of questions that have come in. So we'll have, certainly follow up from this and the presentation available. But as I mentioned, and I heard the sound outside, you're in Berlin. So we appreciate you joining us from around the globe and at a different hour for you to be with us at the symposium today.
Oh, of course. It's great to be here. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thanks so much. All right. At this point, we're going to transition over, and really no symposium would be complete if here at Mather we didn't talk about print and how we're going to be focusing on print still very much being alive and kicking. And in some cases, we've seen some of the publishers who are actually reducing the print availability days, and yet engagement as well as revenue taking an uptick in subscriptions. And as a result, we wanted to focus on a couple of those that are in the throes of that right now. And I'm actually going to transition this over to Mather Economics' own managing director, Matthew Lulay, who will introduce you. Take it away, Matthew.
Thank you, Nikki. Very excited to introduce our next topic on reshaping print analytics. We're very lucky to have two great industry partners and leaders here today, Gary Labarriere, who's the director of audience at New England Newspapers, and also Pat Leader, who's another director of audience and consumer revenue at the Spokesman Review. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them for a number of years and have always had a great deal of respect for their leadership and insights into the industry. So we have a lot to cover in 30 minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary, who's going to walk you through some of his insights. And then we're going to leave some time for a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, Gary, take it away.
Matt, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you so much to the Mather team for having me. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be here to present on something that's an incredibly hot topic in the industry, which is the digital transformation. And a lot of us ourselves are asking, how can we move our print readers over to digital? How can we get them consuming our content in a digital format? We know we still need the print revenue. We know we still need to maintain print. But on the other hand, we know it's very costly, and we're not seeing the growth in print, unfortunately. We're seeing the growth in digital. Let's see, almost a year ago now, the pandemic hit, and we started to really get hit with some hard advertising revenue blows. And we started out trying to figure out how we were gonna make it through. Honestly, our digital efforts were incredibly strong. When I was looking at our numbers, we're growing 60% year over year in digital subscriptions, and that number was great. I mean, we were incredibly happy with that growth, but our print was declining, and the revenue wasn't meeting it. Once we saw the drop from the pandemic, losing nearly 50% in the first few months, we knew we needed to make a change. We saw during the pandemic in the first few months, everything going digital. Groceries, shopping online for groceries was getting big. Making appointments online. Everyone was doing everything online. And at that time, we felt it was right to start down a print reduction path. So at the time, which this was, let's say April or May, we were publishing the Berkshire Eagle, which is our flagship. It's out of Berkshire County, Massachusetts. We were publishing the Berkshire Eagle 7 days a week, and the Bennington Banner and the Brattleboro Reformer were published 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. Once we started down the path, we engaged Mather, actually worked with Matt to work on what the revenue assumptions looked like. And so when we started working down that path, we were able to actually take our 7-day model and blow it out and look at every single day model with Mather. We went from 7 all the way down to 0. We looked at our revenue assumptions, we looked at our expense assumptions, and once we really looked at all those numbers, we decided it was the best idea to move to a 5-day model, move to Tuesday through Saturday with a digital Monday edition. And a Saturday weekend edition, where we actually include a number of different sections that were in the Sunday paper in Saturday. And it made sense for us for a number of reasons, Tuesday through Saturday. We were already publishing the Reformer and Banner Monday through Saturday. And the one piece that was hard for us was to give up the Eagle Sunday. We knew there was a ritual there for our print subscribers. We knew that was risky. But on the other hand, we still do print locally. We print out of the Berkshire Eagle, right below my feet where I'm sitting. And we knew we had to match up the days if we were going to print, and we weren't going to add Sunday back into the Reformer and Banner. So we decided to remove Monday, make Monday a digital edition, and extend that Saturday paper out into a weekend edition. So using our internal forecast and Mather's analysis, we assumed we would see about a 10% total loss in revenue. And that was between circ and advertising. We thought that we would see about a 4% loss in home delivery revenue. And that was due to cancellations or rate reductions. People calling in and saying, you're giving me 30% less papers, or in Vermont, you're giving me 15% less papers. I want my rate reduced by that. But on the other hand, and the reason why we landed on 5-day, we saw our total expenses decreasing by 13%. And so when we did do this change, it's important to note that our print subscriber rates did not change. We did not change our print subscriber rates. We did hold save rates, which were in the realm of between 10 and 20% that our customer service team was able to use in order to save that subscriber from canceling once the announcement was made. But at the same time, we also did a website relaunch, and we also increased our digital rates. We knew, number one, there was going to be some print subscribers that said, you know what, I understand the direction you're heading, and I'm going to move over to a digital subscription. And we had, I'd say a maybe 50 to 100 move over that way. But we knew with the website redesign, with adding the digital Monday in, we knew that, the rates, and we hadn't taken an increase in quite a while, and it was time to increase the digital rates while reducing the print days. We also took carrier pay as a direct reduction based on the days they no longer delivered. This was one that was scary for me. I thought that a number of the carriers would say, you're taking 15 or 30% of my pay overnight, and I'm going to stop delivering. I can't afford it. Luckily, we found carriers saying, I don't have to work 7 days anymore. I don't have to work 6 days. Hey, I'll take the pay cut and it works for me. Remember that the tips are still coming in at the same rate. So they don't lose out on any tip. They're just really reducing their pay. And I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that the carriers were actually pretty happy with the change. Pretty happy to be working 5 days a week. You know, in our market, a lot of our carriers are relatively older, and they were pleased with the change. So after months of analysis with Mather, driving Matt crazy, we finally moved to a Tuesday through Saturday frequency, and this was for all 3 of our dailies in October. We explained to our readers that the message was we needed to do this. You know, during the pandemic, the shift to digital was clear. We saw everyone moving to our website, moving to our e-edition, and we asked for our readers' support through this. We asked that, you know, they know that we're doing this with good intentions. It helped that, you know, we are locally owned. Our investors are local in the community. Our community knows them well. So that really helped us to really paint that picture of, listen, this is where everything's heading, and we need to make that change. And so at the same time, once we did make the change, we heavily promoted all of our digital products. We launched extra e-edition pages in every e-edition, every daily e-edition. So the Monday through Saturday that we publish, our e-edition, we add about 4 to 8 extra pages every day. And our digital Monday, which is just digital, is about a 36-page e-edition. Our Monday paper was 16 pages. So our subscribers are getting, you know, double the content, and just, you know, in a different format. And so we just an example of the digital Monday. So, you know, we aren't restricted with print anymore. So we can do some really cool designs and whatnot on the e-edition, a lot more embedded links, a lot more video, a more interactive experience. And that's what we tried to make our digital Monday, and what we're seeking to make every day of the week in our e-edition a much more interactive and enjoyable experience than reading that print hard copy. And just to the right, that's a quick example of our Weekender, which is published on Saturday. And is meant to be read Saturday and Sunday as a leisure paper. So, what everyone's wondering, the results. At the time of the announcement, I'm happy to say we had more praise and support for our decision than complaints. We had less than 5 cancellations. I can count them on one hand. They escalated to me, so I know exactly who they are. Once we made that announcement, the support came pouring in. People understood the digital transition had to happen. People understood from the pandemic how many companies were moving to digital in some form or fashion. We saw immediate increases to our website in e-edition. Our digital Monday grew by 50% in active readers on our e-edition on Mondays. And the revenue decreases we baked in, we never saw them. We are currently flat in circulation revenue. Where we lost was certainly in single copy. We did not have those days to print, and no one could buy them, right? So that money was gone. We knew immediately we were going to lose that. The good news is we replaced that with our digital subscription revenue. Between our 60% growth and our revenue increases, our rate increases from digital, we're at about 90% increase in digital revenue year over year. We also didn't see any changes in advertising revenue. Now it's a bit hard to see, you know, what exactly happened because of the pandemic, but we did not have any advertisers call in or say, you know what, I was running on Monday, you know, I'm not going to run on Tuesday, or, you know, I was running on Sunday, I'm not going to run on Saturday. We did not see any of that. And just to look at the digital circulation and where the numbers are heading. You can see even once we made that change right in October, and the purple graph is our FY21 in October. It really started to launch even more than it did during the pandemic. And we're still seeing we're at about that 6,000 or a 60% growth number in digital. So in closing, as a company, we see this as a stepping stone. You know, the legacy readers, and I say this all the time, they'll never adapt if you give them exactly what they have in print. If you're not giving them extra e-edition pages, if you're not giving them special content on the website, if you're not making the e-edition an interactive experience, they're going to be fine with their print paper. They are. That's what's going to happen. Every print reader, and like most things, people are creatures of habit. But you can change those habits. If you're not considering a print reduction, you should be. I am a supporter of a print reduction, and I think it is necessary for our industry to start transitioning people over to the digital side.
Thanks, Gary. That was really insightful, and we have lots of questions for you. But just to make sure we can make sure that Pat is adding her thoughts, we'll reserve the questions for the end. But sure. Pat, please take it away.
Thanks, Matt. So the Spokesman Review is a privately owned newspaper in Spokane, Washington. The title of my presentation, Preserving History and Adapting for the Future, I can just start on this slide. The tower that you see is our building where our offices are, and it has been our office since the founding of the newspaper. Moving on, and a little bit about our history. We've actually been in business longer than the state of Washington has existed. It was founded in 1894 by William Coles, who had been a police reporter for the Chicago Tribune. And the Coles family continues to own the newspaper today. Our publisher is the great-grandson of the company's founder and the fourth generation of the Coles family to run the paper. Now, as a privately owned newspaper, we have some advantages. Certainly the family, this is a legacy business for them, and they have a lot more tolerance for revenue decline. But they still, just like any board with a corporate entity, expect to see some revenue. So trying to get a handle on this. So some of the things that we were facing, 21st century challenges. We have a really large footprint. We cover 16 counties in 2 states. Amazon just opened a huge facility in our area and gave us some competition in the labor market, caused us to have to raise rates for delivery personnel. We have an aging population of loyal 7-day customers, like many people do. And the reliance on print newspapers all over the country has declined, and our carriers were delivering smaller draws with the same mileage. And I'm going to get used to changing slides this way. The next challenge, again, all of you in the newspaper industry are facing. The yellow bars are our circulation revenue. The orange bars are our advertising revenue. And you can see the dramatic change from 2016, when the revenue split was about 50-50. Now in 2021, the gross revenue for circulation is 78% of the company's revenue. Some of the actions we've taken to increase revenue, we are big Mather users, and Mather has helped us to raise subscriber rates by 50% every 9 months, 2 years in a row, using market-based pricing. That added $2 million in subscriber revenue. Like many, we've added 4 premium editions. That adds about $120,000 a year in revenue. We've eliminated vacation credit for the first 14 days of a vacation, and we relaunched a digital pay meter after 2 failed attempts, tripling our digital subscribers, again with the help of Listener, to manage a dynamic pay meter. And we've launched a robust welcome and stop save prevention series to improve our churn. We've also done some cost saving, as many people have, and again, as a privately owned newspaper, we don't really have the option to eliminate people and consolidate positions to managing multiple properties. So we really have to be creative. So we've optimized our routes, trying to achieve better profitability for both the carrier and for us. We've tested various versions of print reductions in targeted rural areas. Here are some of the things we've tested. We've eliminated and changed subscribers to digital only, split them into 3 groups. 1, we reduced rate back to the digital rate. 1, we didn't change the rate. 1, we changed the rate. We offered them a tablet and learning sessions. Another test that we did was we reduced print delivery to Wednesday and Sunday only and offered a tablet and learning sessions. And in 1 group, we changed all of the subscribers in the targeted area to US postal mail. Unfortunately, all of our tests resulted in an 80% revenue loss. Not a great result. Then COVID hit. And when that happened, our advertising took a dramatic decrease immediately. We took quick action using some of the tactics that Ben mentioned, explaining it to our subscribers. And we actually eliminated Saturday and didn't really lose subscribers at all. And we reduced our expenses by 16%. And then we heard about this, the Walter Hussman project, where he eliminated all print except Sunday, spent millions of dollars giving subscribers iPads. And our publisher thought this was a pretty good idea. He was really thinking about it. And then we asked, just for confirmation, we asked Mather to help us to look at that. Matt and his team analyzed our data. They looked at all of our historic circulation data, the advertising data, and the expenses. And they provided a recommendation that we cut 1 more day and that the results would be positive within 2 years. After looking at it, we were asked to do more than that. Our publisher considered cutting 2 more days, or maybe just printing 2 days. And we started looking at our hard data, most recent data, the escalating loss in advertising, and we looked for a solution with less risk. So the yellow bars here represent our core data, the core 2 counties where we distribute. The orange bars represent the other 14 counties. And you can see there's an imbalance there. %90 of our circulation and 88% of our revenue is from 2 core counties. Those counties only account for 81% of our expenses. So we decided to make our first new print cuts in the other 14 counties. We tested this option in 1 of the counties in January with good results. So on May the 17th, we will eliminate Monday and Tuesday print delivery in the other 13 counties. And we announced this to our subscribers 3 weeks ago, and I have the first 2 weeks results. And in the first 2 weeks, we have stops that equaled 2.3% of our circulation, which is about twice our average churn. And we've only lost about $600 in subscriber revenue. And we know that the expense savings will offset that. So that is our decision. Obviously, we have not completed this, and we know that we'll see more stops and more folks calling in for revenue reductions or rate reductions, and we can keep you posted on that. But so far, so good. And we appreciate Mather's input, maybe saving us from a really risky decision. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. That was fantastic. So lots of questions for both of you. And just to start off with, Gary, you had mentioned, the habit formation of the print product. People are used to getting in that routine of receiving the print edition every day. Can you talk a little bit about the tactics that you used to try to convert those folks over to the digital replica, and how you were able to grow that engagement on Monday? I think it was by 50%, you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And that as far as the habit goes, there is a ritual there, and I'll tell you how I know. This morning I walked in. Today's Monday. There were 3 customers that called in and asked why they don't have a paper outside. They were looking for it. It's been 6 months, so I know the habit's there. What we did was we heavily promoted our e-edition products. We heavily promoted our newsletters. We had our customer service agents available. They would sit on the phone with a customer for an hour, if that's what it took to get them on the e-edition and to get them to bookmark that site and to get them to go to it every Monday. We were very dedicated to our subscribers to help them get online, even if they couldn't, and get them to read that e-edition, look at a newsletter, go on our redesigned website. We kind of, we launched our new newsletters. We launched the extra e-edition pages, the Digital Monday, and the new website all at the same time. So it's kind of like, come check it out, it brought people there. I can tell you that our page views are up significantly, 40% year over year on our website, and our e-edition is up about 50% of active users versus last year.
Thanks, Gary. So I guess this next question is for both of you, Pat and Gary. You've had very different strategies in terms of renewal pricing and moving rates up on your all access subscribers over the past several years. I guess for Pat first, you've been fairly aggressive on rate. Do you feel like that's had any effect on your ability to convert subscribers over to a reduced frequency landscape?
Absolutely. You can't really ignore that we have been very aggressive, and for example, our 7-day subscribers, who are about 43% of our volume, are paying about $10 a week. And for a local newspaper, that's a pretty hard barrier. And so our stop save strategy, I should mention this, we changed just as we were entering the COVID challenge, which we pay our customer service reps an incentive for saving customers. And what we did, actually, Mather provided us with a little tool so that each account, they can, if they get a customer calling to stop, they can type the account number into a little spreadsheet, and it gives them 3 prices. We changed our incentive strategy and doubled the incentive, and now we pay them the incentive based on the percentage of revenue they save. So they really are incented to try to keep that customer at the highest revenue, where Mather increased the rate. And then they have a bottom level. And with the reduction in print days, they're now getting basically a third less print. And their bottom is, you can reduce it by a third. And we are finding that the reps have embraced it, and they're saving 50% of folks who call in.
That's excellent. Gary, anything you wanted to add on that question?
Yeah, so we've been a bit of the opposite. We have not been aggressive on pricing. Our average rate, being local papers, we're about $6 a week, and costs are relatively lower here as far as labor and whatnot. But we have made a strategy where, we take, anywhere from a 10 to 20% price increase in a ladder every year. But we're not completely aggressive as far as Mather's based pricing. I think that's worked out for us in some ways, as far as our churn rate being relatively low at about 1.8% monthly churn rate. I think that's also helped us be able to goose up those digital rates, especially when we made that switch and made all the digital improvements.
That's excellent. I think we have time for maybe one more question. There's definitely a debate raging, in the industry around the relative merits of gradually reducing days over time over the course of many years, or making a more dramatic change up front, going to perhaps only 1 or 2 days of delivery from a 6 or 7 day print schedule. And I'm curious about your thoughts, having lived this experiment. What your thoughts are on that in terms of the relative merits of either or. I guess maybe Pat, you can start off. Well,
our experience is certainly colored by the COVID pandemic, and with Saturday, eliminating Saturday at the beginning of the COVID pandemic and experiencing basically not a blip. I guess if I had to do it again, I would have done it all at once at that time. What is the saying?
Death of a thousand cuts.
Yeah, something like that. And, we, after increasing prices so much, and, you've explained one cut, now, you explain it the same way again. I do expect for this one to have more volume impact.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, the second one, if we do decide in sometime in the future to do another print day reduction, I do think the second one will hurt a lot more than the first one. But on the other hand, I do think there needs to be some transitional time for the print subscribers to at least get used to it. I think going from, and I respect what Walter Hussman did. I think it's incredible what they've done there. But I think it would be incredibly difficult to tell a print subscriber who's getting it 7 days, you're only going to get it 1 day, or 0, I guess, right? I think that would be hard without doing what Walter did, where we're buying every subscriber an iPad and really, moving home those iPad learning sessions and whatnot.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that insight. We have a lot more questions. Unfortunately, I think we're up against time. So I want to thank Pat and Gary for your insights and taking the time to go through such an important topic that's on the minds of a lot of operators across the country and around the world. So thank you so much. And Nikki, I guess I'll pass it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Gary and Pat. That was an illuminating panel. One of the things that we mentioned at the top was that we really want all of our audience to be able to get something they can take away. And there was so much in there from these experiences that we could take away, 2 very different viewpoints. So now we're actually going to take a break. I mentioned we had intentionally put a break in here, but it's a very short one, just 5 minutes, long enough to maybe stretch your legs or grab a drink of water. But what we want to do, if you're staying here close to your computer, is actually launch a poll. And we encourage you to answer this so everyone can kind of see how their colleagues are responding. So here's the poll for today. How is your newsroom applying data and analytics? So if you look here at the top, you can just select one of these answers. You're either reallocating resources and your investment on data, indicating which content impacts subscriptions, or you're looking at it regularly to stay informed, or you have data dashboards on content impacts subscriptions, newsroom, and how they're using them. Or maybe you're using a third party like Chartbeat and Parsley, but you don't have any dashboards that correlate the subscription specifically to the content. Of course, there's always the option, which is you're using your gut feel for all your newsroom decisions, and editorial should not be influenced by business needs. So if you would, please select the one that best fits how you guys are applying data and analytics in your newsroom. and we'll take a quick break and we'll reveal the results of the poll when we come back. Thanks. Okay, thanks for that 5-minute break. I'm sure all of you are back with us now, and I appreciate you participating in the poll. We have the results, so we want to share them with you. So just a reminder, in case you missed it, the question we asked was, how is your newsroom applying data and analytics? And it looks like 45% of you say, we look at data regularly and we stay informed on what content impacts subscriptions. So pretty good number of you doing that, followed by those who have dashboards and are looking at what content is impacting subscriptions, but the newsroom is not necessarily using those. So really fascinating. We appreciate you sharing that, and we'll have that obviously as part of the recording so you guys can get that information later as well. Okay, at this point, I want to transition to another panel. And the way this is going to work is we have two folks coming in from large media organizations, and they're each going to give their presentation. I'm going to get to introduce them here in just a moment. And they each have a presentation about 10 minutes, but we're going to actually hold questions until the end, just like we did the last session. But please keep them coming. Use that chat button right there at the bottom of Zoom screen, and I'll make sure to toss them to each of our presenters when they're complete. Kicking us off actually is the president of Seattle Times, Alan Fisco, and he's going to talk to us about how they're full steam ahead right now. And I'd like to, at this point, introduce Alan. Take it away.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We appreciate it, and share a little bit about what's going on at the Seattle Times and the significant journey that we've had over the last 8 or 9 years, called really rolling up to a very successful 2020, which I'll get into in just a second. So as I kind of look back at our digital subscription and our audience revenue strategy and roadmap, there are really 4 phases that we have been through. And I wish I could say that we had insights or the brains to identify these in advance. We really didn't, but these were the result of firefighting and knowing what we needed to do next. So the first the first phase was strategy, obviously. The second phase was tools and technology. When we launched, we had a terrible tech stack. Third phase, complete data overhaul. And then phase 4, it's really not phase 4. It's really started on day 1, but it's making sure that you've got the right skills and roles and champions in place in moving forward. So as far as resetting the strategy, it was 2012, and we took a look at kind of what was going on in the state of the industry and with our revenue models. And at that point in time, our thinking was at the publisher level and board level was that the issues were cyclical in advertising, and then when we recovered from the Great Recession, digital advertising will offset advertising losses. And as we started to peel the onion back, we were already dealing with declining rates, an explosion of inventory, the shift mobile to rates even more, and that we really needed to change our strategy and move away from one that was an audience-dominated revenue. And we decided to make that pivot to audience revenue strategy and model. And with that, we decided we needed to get a paywall in place. When we did this, we had 2 major organizational Achilles heels that we had to deal with. And this is one of the first cultural issues. We had a culture, everything had to be perfect, and it was really driven by the newsroom, where you can't, misspell people's names. You got to have the facts right. That permeated the entire organization. We saw ourselves as being collaborative as an organization, but yet we had very well established and well defended silos. So the result was things took forever to get done. And as Tony said, I think on Thursday, there was a lot of talk, but not a whole lot of action, and we needed to get moving on this. So we developed a quick hit task team. Sorry, the coffee hasn't kicked in yet. And launched the efforts to get a paywall installed and up, and we did in 2013. We had some very initial success, but we quickly lost momentum. And why is that? Is because our technology was terrible, both for customers as well as for our employees. It was optimized for print, not digital, and certainly had little to no e-commerce capability. And really what we learned was that our tech resources didn't match our strategy. So I'm not going to go into the details of this. But we launched our new audience management platform. It took us almost 2 years. And I won't go into the details, but post-launch, it was a 24-step process to subscribe, which is embarrassing to even say right now. And now you can do as little as 2 steps. One of the other cultural issues that we were dealing with was serious pushback from the newsroom. They were not on board initially with this. And one of the reasons we quickly learned was that we had two content management systems, one for print and one for digital. So all the things that we were asking the newsroom to do in the digital front just created that much more work for them and that much more anxiety and animosity, and really caused some problems for us. And so we finally got a new content management system installed in 2017. To make matters worse, we were flying blind. We were making data-driven decisions, and most of them were done by, and I saw it on anyway, I'll move on. It was really decisions were made by circulation gut, by the loudest person in the room, the most senior person in the room. And imagine trying to implement these changes and changing the culture when people didn't even know what was working or what wasn't working. And it made it virtually impossible for any kind of accountability. So in broadening collaboration across departments, we need a deeper analytics in the newsroom. And they said they were completely overwhelmed by data and they had very little information. The most important outcome of this analytics hub that we put in was we were finally able to begin creating a common understanding, a shared language around analytics, and trust among the teams, all of which were amazingly critical in unifying the culture and trying to move forward. So now we can slice and dice content in many ways. We can do it by section. We can do it by author. So here's another major cultural change for us. Traditionally, our newsroom had really poorly defined and typically unmeasurable performance expectations. Pretty much how many awards did you win? And this was a really new thing for them. All of a sudden, we were talking about how many subscriptions did you help contribute to? And the key here we rolled this out is that we didn't want to make this a club to beat people over the head with. Our approach was to provide a non-threatening tool that would help us understand what was working and building on those successes, and essentially trying to raise the bar for everyone rather than use it as a club. And we can also now measure the impacts by article. And one of the things that we did was the key to the success of this analytics hub is a digital subscription influence score. So we have 3 different scores and measurements. Did a reader read a piece of content and subscribe within 30 days? Did a reader read a piece of content and subscribe within 7 days? And at the highest level of achievement, did they go from that particular story directly to subscribe? So this is the first time now that readers and editors could work together with a regular cadence to analyze the factors that contributed to success. Was it topic? Was it headline? Was it writing style? Was it time of day? And really helped us identify where to reallocate our resources as well. The bottom line is you just can't write stuff anymore. You've got to really be productive in doing so. A quick, and I call this phase 4, but really this started, as I said, on day 1. A little bit about our structure. We've got a small team that we lean on heavily for this work. They're accountable for strategy, volume growth, and revenue goals. That team consists of a senior product manager who focuses on optimizing technology, senior director of audience revenue, Curtis, who many of you know, who oversees our print and digital pricing strategies, our audience health and business intelligence team, SVP marketing, who works on communications both internally and externally. And we created an assistant managing editor role last year in the newsroom specifically to work as part of this team. One of the other things we did that's been really successful is what we call the morning team. So we have a group of 4, a copy editor, a metro editor, a reporter, and a producer who come in early in the morning, focus on wire stories, what's moving, focus on what's going on social media, what's trending, what's not, publishing a new piece of content for our morning news brief, which is by far and away our most popular newsletter, as well as then publishing content and news alerts. This has been so successful that we're now hiring 3 more positions to do a midday team so we can keep that momentum now into the midday and into the evening so we can keep refreshing the website to keep getting people back on a multiple time a day basis. So how this all kind of rolls up organizationally is we've got daily news meetings where our audience team participates. Once a week, we meet on Wednesdays with the newsroom specifically to go over the subscription progress, and that includes me and a host of others, probably 30 people on the call. Weekly meetings, monthly cross-functional reviews of analytics between the executive leaderships and key leaders within the newsroom, special sessions for our board of directors. We've really tried to push this throughout the organization. How it all wrapped up in 2020, a very successful year. And I know many of us had very successful years. So we finished the year with 73,000 digital subscribers. We grew our total subscriber base by almost 11%. Our digital subscription revenue exceeded the prior year by $3.3 million. And had we not had that digital subscription revenue model in place, it would have been a really ugly year for us with many layoffs, which fortunately we avoided. So this is our digital subscription growth history. As you can see, we started 2020 with about 47,000 digital subscribers. And today we're up to almost 75,000. So we grew almost 28,000 in a year. And digital subscription churn, I'm pleased to say, has not increased. So this graph is a look at our digital ad revenue compared to our digital subscription revenue. The ad revenue is in the orange and digital subscription revenue is blue. As I said, last year was the first year where we exceeded digital subscription revenue, exceeded digital ad revenue, not by much, by about $5,000. And again, part of that is obviously the great success we had on the digital advert audience front, but also the declines tied to the pandemic and advertising. So if you look at the history of our revenue split between advertising and circulation, in 2014, we crossed over where audience revenue exceeded ad revenue for the first time. We finished 2020 with audience revenue representing 70% of our total, and that trend has continued through Q1 of this year. So what's next? I talked about the midday initiative. We're doing a lot of homepage experimentation. We still find that a very valuable tool. We're really focusing on rate growth this time around, or this year. And not that we're not going to be focused on growing the total number, but we really got to raise rates. Our base rate is $3.99, and it's been that way since we launched. We've got 3 price tests in the water now, one at $4.99, $5.99, and 99 cents a day. And the latter is outperforming the first 2. So we're planning to move more people through that increase in pipeline. So I had a lot to cover here in just a few minutes. I can tell you that it's been a fun 10 years. It's been a difficult 10 years or 9 years, probably one of the most rewarding and challenging that I've dealt with in my long career there. You know, one of the last week's speakers said you really have to make this part of your DNA, your organizational DNA. And that is exactly what we find. You can't, this is not just a project. This is an ongoing cultural evolution and revolution. So we'll focus on analytics adoption and use. We need to be smarter with our internal resources. We need to continually improve the site, and we need to continue to grow our digital skills on all fronts, as we have been trying to for the last 8 years.
Thank you, Alan, for that. And what we really appreciate is just you presenting and being in your role, because it's really helpful to be in your shoes. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing how you've had some real challenges and you've had some tremendous success lately to be able to show for your 4-point strategy. So I want to turn it over now as you get your questions ready for Alan, and also going into Debbie's presentation, to Debbie Krennick, who is a publisher of Newsday, which serves the Long Island area and Reston, New York. And they've always been on the cusp of innovative solutions. She's going to specifically focus on some of the specialty content that they've developed, which has been a bright spot in their subscriptions and future. So Debbie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you to Matt and all of our friends at Mather. I am really so happy to be here to talk to you all today about growing digital subscriptions, because that has been our #1 focus at Newsday for several years now. I think this has been a great conference so far, and I've learned so much from every single one of you. It's gratifying to see that we've been following a lot of the playbooks that I've heard from many of you. Being agile, changing the culture, getting things done at the speed of light, all sound very familiar to us at Newsday. And I have to give a shout out to Alan, whose insights have helped us over these past years. I particularly like what several of the speakers said the other day. To get ahead, you have to take some big bets. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. How Newsday has fundamentally changed our thinking and made 5 paradigm shifts that we strongly believe will help us continue to grow at lightning speed and crash through what we thought was the ceiling for us on digital subscriptions. So I'm going to take you through each, but first, let's start with a little context. The Newsday brand is a Long Island institution. Long Island is located off New York City in New York, and it's home to about 3 million people, 1 million households that reflect all demographics and diversity. Newsday reaches fully half of all of the adults on Long Island. Some other things for you to know, we're 80 years young and we are independently owned as of 4 years ago. We have nearly 200,000 total subscribers and more than 1 million weekly unique visitors to our website. Our digital subscription effort did not begin in earnest until January 2019 because we were previously owned by a cable company on Long Island for many years, and our digital products were free to all cable subscribers, and that covered about 85% of all Long Islanders. So, okay, let's, here we go, shift to number 1, branding. We spent a lot of time looking at the qualities of some of the most beloved brands like Nike, Airbnb. Then we studied some brands that went from mundane to love, like Domino's and JetBlue. We wanted to understand the lessons from all of those that we could apply to Newsday. One of the things we really try to do is look outside of the industry and see what best practices are, what are making people successful. So here's a look at what we found. We found that it was imperative to change the perception of Newsday. When asked about Newsday in focus groups, Long Islanders resoundingly told us it's a newspaper, even though we've had a popular website and apps and done video for years. They also told us that they'd never pay for news. So we knew that we had to do something game-changing. If you looked at all the beloved brands, it's really not so much about their products. They've really created success around culture. So we realized that we had to go from being a newspaper product to a brand embedded in the culture of Long Island in many different ways. What does that mean exactly? It means using cultural awareness to be more relevant and engage with consumers. The thing is that tapping into culture isn't easy. You have to connect with people on a fundamental level, understand what motivates them and what they're most concerned with. When done successfully, users do become advocates and more are likely to recommend Newsday to others. So we actually did several things. One is, you might be familiar with Faces of New York. We launched something very similar called Faces of Long Island. And it basically let people across Long Island tell their stories, so people could understand where they're coming from, what they're facing, what the issues are on Long Island. It's actually been incredibly successful and it grew really rapidly. We only launched it in December of 2020. We also launched brand ambassadors, which are basically people that go out and they read Newsday and they tell others about Newsday, friends, family, people across Long Island. It's also a very new program and we're already seeing a lot of success with that as well. And we also launched virtual events, our Newsday Live program. I'm going to talk a little bit about that further on down the slide. But if you take a look at what the results were from our branding efforts so far, we elevated our net promoter score. So Newsday was sort of always in the negative territory. And net promoter score, if you didn't know, is the likelihood for a consumer to recommend the Newsday brand. So we went from a -7 to a +10. And that means that your audience is more loyal than not. Anything above 50 is excellent. Anything above 70 is world class. Anything above 0 is good. So we felt good about that. And one of the things that I do want to talk to you about a little bit later on in the presentation is how our virtual events have helped us dip into this world class territory. Our next shift was from legacy to diversity. It was really important for us to look across Long Island and look at the audience. So Long Island is rapidly changing, and Newsday needed to change with it. It was imperative that we expand and grow our audience to be younger and more diverse. And we're doing this with grassroots efforts among a lot of the target audiences, as well as reporting on issues that shine the spotlight on diversity, equity, inclusion on Long Island. We spent a lot of time identifying the audiences that we weren't reaching, and we put a plan in place to meet face-to-face with the influencers in these different groups, like the American Indians and Latina teachers and minority millennials. We try to do one of these a month, and I, along with all the other executives, attend each one. When the pandemic hit, these became Zooms. Often they were really painful and brutally honest, but they really helped us all understand the issues of the different communities and how they perceive Newsday and what we needed to do in order to change and reach them. So one quick example is we met first with the minority millennials in late 2019 before the pandemic. Their criticism was really harsh. They didn't see people like themselves in our coverage. They saw unconscious bias as well. And if you fast forward to our next session that we had with them in fall of 2020, it was just the reverse. They actually praised us for the fairness of the coverage of the George Floyd protest. And they noticed that we had taken deep dives into issues that affected their lives on Long Island. And a larger proportion of them had become subscribers than when we spoke to them before. So the net result is that when we look at audience now, again, it's early, but we are seeing growth in diverse attendees in both events and subscriptions. One thing that's interesting is that more than 60% of our new digital subs have never been Newsday subscriber before. So we are really excited about that. The third paradigm shift is a platform expansion. I know that many of you are probably scratching your heads on this one. Didn't we chase video as a shiny object years ago? And for most, didn't that fail? The answer is likely yes, and it kind of was for us as well. But we've been doing video for more than 10 years, and we never come close enough selling advertising to pay for that. But that is where the shift lies. So we actually no longer look at video through an advertising lens. And we also know that our audiences want more immersive storytelling on our digital platforms. So we are consciously moving from digital to digital plus video. We know that video is a destination for younger demos, as well as social, and that's how they get their news. We have also found that it's a destination for former print subscribers, and we see that digital consumption is impacting our customer lifetime value for those. We launched our TV studio late last year, and we went live with election coverage, updating all night and back in November. But what we're doing is different than regular TV. The idea is to really take the depth of our reporting and enhance it in video. And our reporters have become comfortable telling their stories on video as they are writing it. Not all of them, but many of them now. Newsday Live also is another key component of this strategy. So it was launched right after the pandemic hit. We really saw a need there. Long Island businesses were really craving information about the SBA loans and about what to do about their business. Many of them were shutting down. So we set up these virtual events, and we brought the experts to them where they could ask personal questions. Then we expanded that to health and schools, as we also saw the need there. And these became sort of community events for people. We added music and authors, and it was a place where people could convene. it answered their questions. That was really important. We said their names, we said their questions, it gave them peace of mind. The response was really overwhelming. I actually got many letters from people saying, I've never been a subscriber before, but I subscribed today after watching your event. So here are the results. The response to digital plus video has been impressive. Again, early, but impressive. We're seeing 60% higher conversion rates for articles with video. And when talking to focus groups about this, they tell us that they come for the article, but the video enhances their experience. And additionally, we're seeing a 75% higher conversion when the video is played, as it causes more engagement and also contributes to that lift. Again, this is in its infancy, but we're very excited about these early results. Our Newsday Live division has really enjoyed the success with both B2B and B2C virtual events and shows. We've had over 250,000 event attendees. We did 155 events, and these are averaging a 67 NPS. Again, when 70 is considered world-class. We've had many of these, particularly some of the business ones, some of the education ones, and some of the health ones come in at 80 and 90, which really showed that people really needed this help and really appreciated it. We're also now working on expanding into other things like esports and home buying on Long Island and different categories like that. Our next paradigm shift was going from the funnel to cyclone. So it's all about creating engagement and sales. So a lot of you have talked about the funnel, push them in at the top, move them down from anonymous to somewhat engaged to becoming loyal subscribers. But with a funnel, the conversion takes place at the bottom and it takes time. And you may never build enough engagement to get them there. Our strategy is moved from funnel to what we're calling cyclone. It's rather than pushing them down, we're nudging them in from all sides of engagement and all levels of engagement. And this new approach is helping us convert less engaged consumers and convert people faster. Part of this is not new in the industry, but we have really tried to optimize this on all levels. Our $1 for 5 months offer is a good example of getting consumers with long introductory offers. And it also, on the experience level from social to headline grazers, we're pushing them all in. So the result is converting them faster. And in the next section, I'm going to talk about, how it's easier than trying to, do the long sell. Even more exciting is our conversion rate. So it's over 1,000 starts per million non-sub-unique visitors. That's up from 500 just 16 weeks ago. And in a few slides, I'll talk about digital subscription growth, which is already well ahead of our 2021 goal. So our fifth paradigm shift is all about engaging them after they subscribe. We have spent a lot of time trying to entice people to subscribe to Newsday, telling them what they'll get before they pull out their credit card. But what we've learned is something really important, that it's easier to get them to understand our portfolio and value after they subscribe. So first, we really sell the articles by making them as engaging as possible. And the subscribe mode is simple. It's not a big sell. We just want to underpromise and then over-deliver. Once they've converted, we onboard them with all of our most popular items. That would be app downloads, content interest, newsletters, e-edition, and our opt-in products. So you can see that step-by-step process in the phone here. And the results, our digital sub growth rate has been fast and furious, and we've been thrilled. We hit more than 40,000 subscribers in the first couple of years. Yeah. We actually are at 41,000. We're knocking on the door of 42,000. So, but the thing that's really interesting is that our starts this year are 15% higher versus last year when we were in the height of the coronavirus bump. So quickly, in summary, we continue to shift and grow and think differently. We realize we have to do this if we want to shatter our industry benchmark ceiling on digital subs, which we definitely want to do. And in closing, I just quickly wanted to say, if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or to Patrick Tornabene, who heads up our consumer revenue and strategy team and has worked very closely with Mather on this. We can give you more detail on our numbers and all of those kind of things. Thanks again, Nikki, Matt, and everyone for hearing me out.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate the presentation and for being so thorough. This was very, very helpful, and to look at the paradigm shifts really right next to the results that you saw from each of them. And maybe just a question for each of you, and we can start with Alan and then kind of move to you, Debbie, but you guys both covered so much and you had a multi-part plan. If there are members of our audience who are hearing this and thinking, wow, I am really behind, we're not taking every piece of content and putting it through 3 different scores, or we're not yet to the stage where we are engaging our millennials the way that Newsday is, what area or what tactic would you actually recommend in terms of advice for telling them where to focus first?
That's a loaded question there. So as I look back at our journey, it was rocky to say the least. I mean, clearly the tech stack has to be good, but for us, the real game changer is the analytics hubs, so that people really knew now exactly how that work was impacting our digital subscription goals. And that was a game changer for us. So I would say, make sure that you've got a strong analytics background in there, and then B, you're really doing it cross-departmentally. It's not just a newsroom initiative. It's not just an audience development initiative.
Yeah, I would agree with what Alan is saying. I think, for us, it was really focusing on, how do we drive, we're trying to drive at least 1,200 starts a week or subscriptions a week. So that's key, and the cross-functional teams is really helping with that. So it's bringing in somebody from newsroom and audience and marketing, and just give them the goal and let them run with it. I think at Insider, that was one of the things that they said. But I think the thing of it is that you can't, it's hard to just do one thing, right? Because at the same time, we were focusing on paywall. We're doing a lot of things in the newsroom with metrics and really getting in deep with the reporters. So I think it has to be multi-pronged, but those are a couple of the big ones, definitely.
Okay, very helpful. And as you mentioned, you have to do multiple things at one time almost. You almost can't focus on one. And one of the questions that came in that I think is helpful is, once you have those analytics in place and once you kind of have the tech stack figured out, the question is whether or not you have a playbook for how you raise subscription prices. I know that's a really popular topic we've seen a lot of today, and different approaches. So just curious to each of you how you're looking at the price raise part of this strategy.
We are, as I said, we're doing 3 different price tests, thanks to Mather and the wonderful tools that they give us to really help us understand what's going to move the needle the most. One of the industry challenges that I've seen in the past few years with digital subscription pricing is it's too low across the board. I feel like it was almost replaying back in the days when we would chase print circulation numbers by penny sales and low subscription rates before we realized people were willing to pay much more for print, and they're willing to do so on digital. So that's really our focus here. We got to drive more rate out of the loyal digital subscribers that we have.
Yeah, again, I would agree with that. I would say that so we are really pushing the dollar for 5 months, which is not a new concept. Boston has used it and other places have used it. We're being, really keenly focused on pushing, as I said about the cyclone, people hitting that, in all different areas. So really getting them in. And then, what we've done some testing, and we realized that, so the roll to originally was like $349, and we're having success with roll to now at $699, even more so than at $349. So we're doing more testing. We're getting ready to test roll to, I think, at 3 months and 4 months. So, we'll report on those results.
Okay. Debbie, question specifically for you around your net promoter score. So kudos for looking at that, and even more impressive, moving it from the negative to the positive 10. The question around the net promoter score specifically is, did you actually see a correlation between that improving to increased revenues?
I would have to say yes, because, it really has been over the last year that we have added so many subscribers. And we heard over and over again that, these things that we're doing, and it's not, it's not just one single thing. So the virtual events, I think, were a big driver, but I think also the different types of coverage that we were doing. So yes, I see that as adding to our overall revenue.
Okay, great. And Alan, just a final question for you. One of the questions that came in is around how you're going to focus specifically on getting younger audiences. Is it about digital? Is it about live streaming, et cetera? Just curious if you can tell us how you guys are focusing on getting that younger reader base.
Yeah, it's digital. And for us, if we look at our Scarborough data, our largest audience segment is millennials, which is kind of counterintuitive based on what we see in the industry. And certainly attention toward Sunday print among that younger audience. So I think ultimately we're leading toward a 1 or 2 day print model plus digital. One of the areas that I'm fearful that we're kind of missing the boat on is podcasts. I have sons who are in their late 20s, and they're all into podcasts. And we tried it and failed, and we need to try it again. But we need to figure out how to crack that nut, or I'm afraid we're going to lose that audience altogether.
Really important. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you both, Debbie and Alan, for sharing with us. Again, very thorough presentations. Really nice to see you being vulnerable, sharing your growth opportunities, and then the fantastic results you've had to date. So I appreciate you both contributing to our 3rd day here at the symposium.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to shift gears, and we have always rounded out the final day of our symposium with an industry spotlight. And what I love about these is that we're able to take some of the information that we're seeing in the media subscriptions world and apply them to different industries. In this case, one would say we've saved the best for last. We get to focus on the wine industry. And so what we're going to take a look at is how news media and wine, they're not actually all that different. So at this point, what I want to do is introduce to you former publisher and CEO of the Dallas Morning News, now currently the founder and proprietor of 6 Mile Bridge Wines. So with that, I'll let you take it away. Welcome, Jim Maroney.
Thank you, Nikki. I sure appreciate it. What I want to talk today about is the sort of similarity between what we were doing at the Dallas Morning News and what all of you all have been doing and talking about today, your subscriptions, both print and especially digital, and what that does for the person like me in the wine business. To start with, I assume that a lot of people, a lot of you on this Zoom call have gone to a wine tasting somewhere, and you've probably gone to 2 kinds of wineries. One, a really big winery where you can buy their wine there, but you also can find it in liquor stores. You can find it in grocery stores. And then you go to the smaller boutique wineries, wineries that you can buy it there, but if you don't buy it there, you're going to have to either go to their website or join their club. You're not going to find their wine in the liquor stores and in the grocery stores. And I'm going to focus on that segment because they are, like your subscribers, a DTC business. They're a direct-to-consumer business. The bigger wineries, a lot of them don't know so many of their customers because they work through distributors, and the distributors sell to the end retailer, who then, of course, sells to the customer directly. Whereas you have both the print and digital subscribers who you sell directly to and who you know, and the wineries that are small like ours, we sell directly to people through online and in the tasting room. So let's think about it a moment. You have a print subscriber and you know their name and their address, and that tells you a lot about who that person is. You also have digital subscribers, and besides getting their email address, you know what they're consuming and when they're consuming and how often they're coming back to the site and all that good information. And it helps really round out who your customer is and lets you target them and try to retain them, keep them from churning and so forth. So you take a winery, a small one, and most of them have clubs, wine clubs. You may be a member of several wine clubs. And those wine clubs are sort of like, those wine club members are sort of like your subscribers. We start off with them, let's say, coming to the tasting room, and they try some of our wine and they buy some. Some of them decide that they don't want to take it with them back on a plane, so they leave it to us and we will ship it to them. And now we've got their name and their address, and we also, of course, have their email to correspond with them. Another opportunity comes when wine clubs release their wine 2, 3, maybe more times a year. And the club members not only purchase wine so that the wineries know what kind of wine they're purchasing and how much of each SKU, each different wine they're buying, but again, because they're shipping it to them, they have their name and their physical address. All of that information can then come together to help you know and learn about who your direct customers are. So having had an opportunity to work at the Dallas Morning News and work with Mather and see what great work they did at helping us price both our digital and print subscriptions, I got into this business and said, you know, there are these similarities and maybe Mather could help me with what I'm doing. So a couple of years ago, I talked to Matt, and they were indeed already a little bit engaged in the wine industry. And I offered to connect them with a couple of wineries in the Paso Robles area where we are until I could get enough data to start working with them. Well, that did come to pass. And I want to talk to you today about just one particular aspect of what we do with Mather, and that is something that all of you do. That is discussing the relationship between price and volume, or if you will, the elasticity of your pricing for your product. We release wine once a year in September. People, our members, can then buy that wine online. For the next, roughly 11 and a half months, we need to have a sufficient amount of wine to both pour and to sell in the tasting room until we get around to September of the following year, and we release the next vintage. Right now, we're on into our second vintage, our 2017 vintage, and in about January of this year, we realized that this wine, our wine, most all of them, frankly, were selling faster than we had anticipated. And that might not seem like a problem to somebody, but when we don't want to release the 2018 wines until September of this year, and they're beginning to sell out prior to August, we could find ourselves with predicament. Either we have to open the 2018 wines earlier than we want, and we don't want to do that because they show better in the tasting room, particularly with more age on them, more age in the bottle, or we close down the tasting room, which we also don't want to do because it's our primary channel for acquiring customers, new customers. So I said to Matt and to Nathan at at Mather, I said, all right, why don't you take one of our SKUs, in fact, take our Cabernet Sauvignon, and it was selling out at the fastest rate, and tell me what would happen if I raised the price, but not over $100. I was a little concerned about raising it above $100 because we're a new winery. We're only at our second vintage. And, you know, that's I guess just maybe a perceived barrier for some people in terms of their wine spending. So what we did is we asked them to do this, and they did. And as you can, if I'll orient you here for a moment, you'll see our 2017 Cabernet Sauvignon is the darker blue line. And it shows you that you'll see a number 35.9%. That means that on the 22nd week of our fiscal year, September to September, the 22nd week, which would be about the last week of January, we had 36% of our inventory remaining, and I wanted to get it all the way out to 52 weeks if I could. What Mather is showing on this chart is that without doing anything, if we leave it at the $80 price, which it currently was at, we would run out of wine somewhere around week 40. Obviously, earlier than we wanted to run out of it. So Mather came back, and we can look on this next slide. And you can see that we were now 4 weeks later, we're in the 26th week. So we're just about the end of February. And they plot for us what's going to happen if we would move the price up by 20%. We would move it from $80 to $96. And if you could tell from the previous chart where we were going to end toward the end of April, we're now going to be ending in about the 44th week, which would be around the end of June. Still not out all the way to 52 weeks, but certainly better than it was before we pushed that out a little bit. And of course, the better part is we've now raised the price $16 or 20%. And as all of you know, just like in the newspaper or online business, that money pretty much goes straight down to the bottom line. So it's a actually pickup in profit and margin for us. So now let's see what actually happens. Next slide. You can see that we actually ran out of wine in the 40th week, 39th or 40th week, which would be put us just about a couple of weeks ago into May. What we did not do correctly was tell Mather that I gave Mather all of our Cabernet inventory to work with, so they had the full amount of inventory so they could create this depletion curve. That's what we've been looking at, is how fast will the wine sell out at different price levels. I forgot to tell them that we hold back 10 cases of wine so that we have a reserve, we have a library wine that we can pour for years down the road. So when they showed that we would run out of wine toward the end of June, and we ended up running out of wine actually in May, the difference were those 10 cases that we held back. So frankly, had I given them the total inventory minus 10 cases, their projection would have been absolutely right on target within maybe just a week of when we actually did run out of wine. Now, you might say, well, why didn't you just go ahead and figure out what the price was going to be to keep it so that you would not deplete all your inventory until the 52nd week, until the end of August? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I had a little threshold problem with above $100, and the price that it would have taken for us to keep the inventory from depleting before the end of August was a 45% increase off the $80 price, or $116. I am confident from my working with Mather that had I had the guts to take the price up from $80 to $116, we would still be pouring our Cabernet Sauvignon 2017 in our tasting room today. instead of running out of it 2 weeks ago. I think the moral of this story is that you need to, first of all, give Mather clean and good data. I failed on that one. Secondly, you should consider exactly what the data is telling you is the answer to what it is I asked them. I wanted to not run out for 52 weeks. I should have just, instead of putting $100 limit on it, said, what's it going to take? And they would have come back and said $116. And if I would have had the courage of my convictions about Mather, I would have raised that price to $115 to round it off. And as I said, we'd be pouring that wine today. So give Mather good data. Let them bring you back the possible answers or solutions that data is providing for you. Trust in what the data says, and then be smart in implementing whatever that data is leading you to do. I'm confident, as we did at the Dallas Morning News, and as I'm learning now in the wine industry, the data will lead you to the right answer and get you what you're trying to accomplish based on the data that you have. There are just a couple of other things that I've mentioned, just like what you all do. We can also be looking at who our customers are and where we can find those, perhaps online, and attract them to our site so that we may have an opportunity to sell them wine, or we can attract them to come to our tasting room where we can have them sample our wine. Once we have people who are members of our clubs, we will be looking to Mather to help us understand how to keep them from churning out, just like you do. And we'll actually be looking at Mather for some win backs, so that we go back to those people who have churned out and bring them back into the club. We can do all these things that you all do on a much greater scale with the data we have and with the algorithms that Mather uses. So that's just a little bit of how you can apply what Mather does, not just to the news business, but also to really, I think, any DTC business that's out there can benefit from the algorithms they have and how they apply them to help you improve how you run your business. So I've got a bottle of wine here, but it's like, only 12:30 in Texas. So that's probably a little bit early for a glass, Nikki. So I'm just, you notice it's not uncorked. So that's as close as we're going to get for today's discussion.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for that presentation. Fantastic. And great to see you again. I got to say, when I first started talking with the Mather folks about helping with the symposium, we were still in the throes of gathering presenters, and little did I know we'd have this reunion opportunity. So great to see you. And hey, congratulations on parlaying your experience at Dallas Morning News into the vineyard world. And I am so grateful that you were able to sort of pick this up and do this pricing analysis for us. So just before we let you go, and before we open that bottle of wine, because I'm sure it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
It's gotta be.
It's gotta be. Just a few questions for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, maybe giving clean data, because if the goal was to extend the full 52 weeks, obviously, when you think about pricing and taking something as large as potentially a 45% price increase in the media space, you'd be in a situation where, if you're the media industry, you have to consider stops. You have to consider what you do if it went, badly, potentially. In this space, if you had gone all the way up to where they had recommended, what was really the downside for you? Is there a risk in raising the price too high? And then what if you wanted to take it back down, and just the volatility of pricing in the wine business?
Sure. I think, Nikki, and by the way, it's great to see you. I was so excited when I heard you were going to be the moderator. I think the risk was probably more in my head, because I didn't have enough experience in this business to really know what would happen if I made such a significant increase in the price sort of, overnight. And I think, like probably other people that have been talking today and yesterday and day before, when the other days, taking the price up is important when you have the opportunity and do it well. But taking the price back down is a little bit of a different story. And I was a little concerned, again, without the experience, to say if I took it up to 115 and it actually slowed things down greater than I and Mather had projected, then bringing that price back down starts to feel like discounting. And I'm not a big fan of discounting something, once you've established a price to value ratio with your company. So if I just, again, and I mean, and you know this, Nikki, I mean, we raised the price of the Dallas Morning News newspaper in 2008 by over 40% overnight. I should have just gone back and said, believe the data and go with it, and then stick with the price. And if I'd been in this industry longer, I would have. I'll know next time to take the price up and leave it there.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned in your presentation that's been hit on a couple times by several of our presenters is just this need to have first-party data, to be able to have something more than rely on others. And you mentioned for you, it's things like a mailing address because someone's come into the tasting room and wants their wine mailed to them and their information. How critical in this pricing analysis was it for you to have that first-party data to be able to weigh in on this when you did this project with Mather?
Look, you and I talked about it for a long time, and first-party data is gold, particularly as you get Apple and others, the cookie sort of goes away. Knowing exactly who your customer is, knowing in the newspaper business today that you have that opportunity to know who your customer is when these larger corporations work through distributors and retailers and really don't have that one-to-one relationship. It's absolutely critical. And so if I was relying on third-party data, I wouldn't have the conviction about what the data was telling me that I do, because I know Mather is working with our data, our first-party data. I think it used to be gold. It's now whatever's better than gold.
All right. Well, last question for you. And I think this is an important one too, because a lot of people have been talking through the 3 days we've had about just the impact from COVID. And yours in a very different business, even though obviously so much of what you've learned has been transferable. Given just the pandemic situation, just curious how it's been impacting you, meaning have you guys had fewer tasting room opportunities, potentially therefore higher online sales? Or, I mean, we've all read headlines in terms of just alcohol sales in general being higher. So has this been something you can speak to in terms of sort of pre-COVID and now where we live?
Sure, absolutely. We had the things you read about. We had times when the state, 2 different times when the state closed down tasting rooms completely. And then we had the second tier, which was you could only have tastings out of doors. And of course, during certain parts of time, even in California, the weather isn't always perfect. And that would diminish traffic. And then you just had people that were understandably reluctant to travel anywhere or reluctant to be in any group of people at all. So the tasting room visitations across the state of California, and including us, went way down. But to your point, people then started looking for opportunities to interact in virtual tastings online. And they look for opportunities to buy your wine outside of the releases because they couldn't come to the tasting room. And all of that, online sales and virtual tastings went up dramatically. And interestingly now, outside of, COVID's not over, but clearly, the number of people vaccinated and so forth has grown so much in California, like in Texas. We're seeing the online sales drift back to sort of a more normal rate, and we're seeing the traffic to the tasting room go back up to where it had been before.
That's great. Well, you've definitely piqued my interest on a virtual tasting, and I'm going to have to look into that after this is over. But thank you, Jim, for your presentation, for being with us today. And thank you really for all of our speakers. At this point, I'm going to wrap it up by turning it over to Matt Lindsay, who's going to do a quick summary for us and head out. Thanks again. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
It's great to see you again, Jim.
Good to see you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. So I again, just wanted to say thanks to all the speakers and also to our wonderful staff behind the scenes. There's been a cast here: Shelly, Martha, Nikki, Steve, Stone, and Clara. They've done a phenomenal job. So thanks to all of you. Thank you also to the speakers. I can't thank you all enough. Just a phenomenal amount of information that's been shared today. Today we had Ben, Monty share what they're doing at Google to help the, they realize that there's no one size solution fits everybody, but there are some core principles that span the industry, and those are phenomenal to hear. Selma Stern at The Insider shared kind of what they've done to grow their subscriptions over the past few years. Lots, and again, it all starts with great journalism and a lot of science and A/B testing. We've heard the great stories about kind of the transition from print to digital with Gary and Pat Leader, both interesting, very knowledgeable industry veterans that have lived through this transition and had some great lessons to share. We also had Alan and Debbie share from a publisher's perspective what their organizations are doing to move along their roadmap. Again, very much a combination of strategy, tools, data, and then kind of the org structure, as well as the kind of incorporating some of the science into this that data enables us to provide. And lastly, Jim Maroney. Jim and I, as he mentioned, he was a very much an innovator and pioneer in the newspaper business when it came to certain tactics that we were fortunate to work with him on, and he's doing the same thing in the wine business. So I can't wait to continue working with him and actually getting out to Paso and his winery, 6 Mile Bridge, as soon as I can do that. I have had his wine, and it is really good. So it's definitely worth the price. Anyhow, thanks to all of you for spending the time with us. This has been a wonderful 3-day symposium. I know it's a lot of time out of your schedules, but we really appreciate that time, and we hope you've taken something away from this lesson that you can apply to your own businesses to improve your performance. Please feel free to give us a shout if you have any questions. We will be sharing these documents to whatever the speakers feel comfortable sharing publicly, but we'll have some recordings, and we'll be posting that on our website, and we'll be sharing those when they are available. Anyways, thank you all so much, and I look forward to speaking with you all again soon.